Okay, so I just want everybody. I used to do the joke intros, but you know what? I'm a nice guy. I'm gonna stop bullying people. I'm fine if Rob's a communist who invented the pussy hat. I'm fine if Tiberius fought in Afghanistan to establish an ANCAP state. That's fine, but we're gonna stop with the jokes going forward. It just shortens the time frame. So we're gonna start going straight to the right. So first, I'm gonna ask Republican Nation, who are you?
My personal name is Jace Haber. Obviously, I'm a Republican. I'm a hardcore Republican. I stand by all the values that the Republican Party promotes. I became a Republican since I can't remember when. I voted my first time voting. I voted for George Bush. And after that, I've never voted Democrat. I love the history behind the Republican Party. I love the fact that the Republican Party, every major movement that's happened in this country has happened thanks to the Republican Party. And you can follow me on Twitch, I guess, the Republican Nation.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to have you back with a much better camera and with no popping in your mic. Rob Noor, who are you?
Yeah, my name's Rob Noor. I have a YouTube channel called Normal America with Rob Noor. I'm also on Twitch under the same name, DLive. You can find me on other platforms like Twitter. But yeah, I'm just someone who I've lived in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. I think that both parties at the establishment level don't really care about any of the working class or regular people of this country. So I wanted to start a show and try to be a voice and to explain things to people that don't necessarily have time to sit down and watch the news all day or read a bunch of books all day. Just kind of the general news that's going on. I ran for Congress in a special election in 2019 as a Republican, and I'll be running again in 2022. Hopefully this time winning. So thanks for having me on again.
I wish you the best of luck in your election.
Thank you.
And next we have Tiberius.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tiberius D. I run the show called The Conversation, but it's on my Twitch channel. You're welcome to check that out. We do left versus right kind of things, but it's not usually always balanced. But it usually is one topic, 1 hour. It's Wednesdays and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. I am socially liberal and economically conservative, so I tend to piss off everyone. And yeah, I'm going to pass it off to the next person.
Wonderful. I'm using Tiberius and Primes as now recruiting grounds. Their channels have been very helpful in me finding more smaller creators on Twitch to help bring on the panel. You should also check out both of their stuff. They make pretty decent panel shows. But of course, you should, if given the option, you should always choose here, though. Stay with the home team. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Demon Mama.
Hey, everyone. I'm Demon Mama. I do a political show here on Twitch. Been on hiatus this month, but should be coming back hopefully soon. You could check out my backlog on YouTube or here on Twitch. And I'm going to just drop my follows down in the chat. So give me a follow if you want to learn a whole bunch about various topics, from trans issues to prisons to police. I talk about a whole lot of stuff at great depth. And we try to suss out the truth.
Even though we disagree on aliens, I always enjoy your perspective. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Ankar.
Hey, man. Yeah, I'm Ankar. I started streaming maybe a couple weeks ago or a month or so ago. Appreciate Dylan for letting me come on the show tonight. I'm a right winger. Like Rob Noor, I don't really support the GOP. I have kind of the same views. You can find me on Twitch, Ankar. We just kind of I don't know. We just talk about stuff. Sometimes it's highly political. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has nothing to do with anything. But I talk a lot of shit. I'm kind of an asshole. So glad to be here. Thanks.
If there's anything Twitch needs, it's more assholes. I appreciate you coming on the show, Ankar. Next, I'm gonna throw it over to Supreme.
I'm gonna pass.
Hey, he's just another commie. That's what I'll say. Next, we have North.
I was old when the world was young. My takes are the best. That is all.
I'm going to ask for a Twitch mod to be here at all times to please monitor North's conduct. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Vivian Wolf.
I'm Mix Vivian Wolf. I'm a historian and super spooky anti-fascist. I talk about political extremism, far-right cults, and terror groups and stuff like that. That's sort of my main focus, but I talk about a lot of other shit as well. I keep popping up on random panels for no apparent reason because I have nothing better to do with my life.
Well, you know what? I appreciate you wasting your time with the rest of us.
I'm sure
I appreciate
it'll be
that.
a lot of fun.
I sure damn hope so. Okay, next we have the first topic. Now, the rules are ground rules. Everybody gets an intro statement where they can state their thing, state their position for 1 minute. No interrupting anyone else. I trust you. There'll be enough time for you to engage on the topic afterwards. Please hold it in. We had a lot of trouble last time with this, and I ended up having to kick somebody permanently from the show because of it.
Who?
So just wanted to. It was Grumple.
Ooh.
Yep.
Unlucky.
Oh shit, he follows me. Okay.
He's a cool dude. He's not great with following rules sometimes.
Doesn't play well
I love
with others.
He's got tiny little spaghetti arms. Why would you want him?
Come on. No bullying the people who aren't present. No bullying the people who aren't present. Now, so again, no interrupting anybody. If you do, I will mute you. I give you
if I really need to?
You really can't.
What
Trust
if, what if the laws of men and magic
I was so frustrated last week. I don't even want to joke about it. No jokes, nothing. I was so frustrated last week. You wouldn't imagine.
You have no power. Yes. Yeah. My bad.
Okay, no problem. Just no even joke about it. Just don't do it. I just want this week to go more smoothly when it comes to that on the intros. It's literally just 1 minute for each person. People just got to be quiet. Okay. After that, you can engage for like about an hour on the issue. Go back and forth. If anybody doesn't, I'll try to help people who aren't able to speak because they're able to make their way in every once in a while. But I'll mostly try to stay out of it. Then at the end, you have 1 minute outros on like the issue. For that, you also have to be quiet for other people. You can do your outro anyway. You can direct it at somebody else. You can just do a general outro any way you want. We'll do that for 3 topics, and that's the ground rules. I'm going to be more firm this time with rules than last time because last time was literally living hell. I'm not going to put up with last time again. So I'm excited to host this show. And the first topic, as written down, was... should statues of Confederate figures be taken down and the names of military bases with Confederate names renamed? I'm going to start this with Tiberius.
I appreciate you starting off. Okay, this is really hard for me to do just because I don't really care too much about this issue. When it comes to issues, I'm more of an objectivist, and when it comes to how people interpret symbols and statues and whatnot, it's a very, very, very subjective issue. If it comes to a democratic vote, I'm just going to abstain. This really just isn't a thing for me. Like, what... just as a given example, if you take the swastika here in the West, it's very, very inflammatory. You take it out east in India, it's something to be revered. What you have means different to you, what it means to me. I don't really want to police what that means. I find that to be ethically verboten. So I want to pass off to the next person.
Wait, what was the last word that you used?
Verboten. Yeah, I'm sorry. Verboten. It's a German word. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, we're going to throw it over to the Republican Nation.
My opinion on this is very simple. You can't erase history. So these monuments were there 10 years ago. Nobody said anything. Out of nowhere, suddenly there's a big, war against these monuments that represent a part of history. A lot of people can look at it from one way and look at it like, oh, it reflects a man that owned that was a slave owner. Listen, if we go down that route, then we have to change the name of New York, because the Lord York was the one that brought in slaves. He was a slave trader. In that case, Barack Obama's statue offends me, because Barack Obama, my family came from Cuba. My grandfather was a slave in Cuba, and Barack Obama sat with Raul Castro, which is Fidel Castro's brother, the Castro regimen, and I feel offended because my family was persecuted by the Castro regimen. So then all of the Barack Obama statues should come off too, because it offends me personally. So I mean, if we're going to go down that route, we would have to change everything, and we can't erase history. It shows us how far we've come from that moment to now. And I mean, it's just ridiculous to me that people are even taking offense to this right now, and they never even cared about it 10 years ago. It's so ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
I got some bad news for you, Republican Nation. Your mic's peaking.
God damn. Okay.
If you turn down the gain, you might be able to salvage it.
What about now?
You do actually do something better. Can you turn it down a little bit more on the gain?
Yeah.
Okay, say something.
Hello?
Does that sound better?
I think it sounds better.
Okay.
Sounds way better.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Next is Rob.
Yeah, I don't really. I'm with Tiberius in that I don't feel strongly about this. I think that I don't have a problem if it's going to be democratically decided. This is one of the issues. I don't think everything should be pure democracy, but this is something, hey, if the majority of people are offended by one of these statues and they vote to have it removed, I don't really have a problem with that. Now, I will say, just for the sake of what's really going on here, I don't believe most of the people that want some of these statues down are just going to stop at Confederate statues. We see they're trying to pull down abolitionists. They're trying to pull down George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. And a lot of this is being used by fascists and Marxists that want to erase U.S. history and want to move on to other things and use this as a position of power. But as far as the Confederate statues themselves or renaming bases, I wouldn't have a problem if people vote to do that. You just can't go out and unilaterally do it. That's a felony and you should be charged. Anyone who's ripping down statues like that should be criminally charged.
Okay, next is going to be Ankar.
Yeah, I actually do feel pretty strongly about it, but I'm not sure that I really care in the absence of it being, why it's being done right now. I didn't think that anybody was going to take the heritage history angle, so I was planning on doing that as it's the most difficult one to defend, but apparently Republican Nation's going to do it. So, the Democratic mandate angle has been covered. You don't, one of the issues is essentially you don't negotiate with terrorists. And as far as I am concerned with the textbook definition of terrorism, that's essentially what this is. It's a terroristic framework that's being used to get rid of the statues. It's I would love to be able to say that slippery slope is a fallacy, but I think that the left has went ahead and just made that a reality. We had Trump in 2017, whenever they were starting this Confederate and slave statue nonsense. He was like, what's next? Washington, Jefferson? And now we see Washington and Jefferson. I think I read yesterday that one of the Roosevelts, they're starting to angle for that statue. And my interpretation of it is similar to one of the other guys in that it's just memory holding. It's just wiping out of history so that, it's a common thing that you see in all the communist revolutions. It's a revolutionary tactic to just get rid of symbolism, to get rid of cohesion, get rid of history, et cetera, et cetera. So, for that reason alone, I've kind of gone from not caring about it to thinking, no matter how much it offends everybody, I don't want any of them taken down.
Okay.
Dylan, can I go next?
We're all champing at the fucking bit.
Everybody, I can see you all want to, but next time I will order it when it comes to intros. But for this one time, I'll throw it to you first, North. But for clarification later, I will eventually get it to you. Just don't do that again. Okay.
Okay.
I'll throw it to you
Okay. Fair enough. We failed to reconstruct this nation after the Civil War. Absolute failure. Complete fucking failure to reconstruct this country. Complete and absolute, utter fucking garbage attempt made by the U.S. government because the administration was flopped over and we have a shitty political system with a two-party fucking nonsense, okay? So, first past the post is garbage, right? And this leads to us, afterwards, having a period where we want to venerate, right? Not erase history, right? We're not taking away from the textbooks, right? We're just not trying to venerate literal fucking traitors to the United States. Right? That feels simple. That feels like a no-brainer. That feels like, I don't know, maybe don't name military bases after traitors of that exact military that sought to destroy the fucking Constitution because they wanted to keep black people as chattel. Right? That feels pretty fucking reasonable to me. And it feels really fucking weird when people are like, oh, we're erasing history. No, we're not. Wait, they're still teaching about those assholes in fucking APUSH, and to defend them incessantly like they're some kind of fucking heroes is bullshit, ass backwards, and completely fucking stupid.
Okay. Be sure to speak up next time. I'm gonna throw it over next. That was a joke. Do not turn up your mic. Demon Mama.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with the taking down of, or the renaming of bases or the taking down of these statues. Statues don't really teach history. They are quite literally propaganda. They're they're the symbols of what you want to venerate in a society. And I do think there is a trouble with venerating people who literally went to war against the government that's currently, democratically controlled by the people. But I also think that the idea that like these statues are like old pieces of history, when many of these statues went up well after the war, and some of them very, very recently, is just it's just ahistorical. So I don't think statues really serve to teach history particularly well, and as a result, I don't really think that their place is in society serves as historical teaching points. Instead, they often are used to reinforce certain ideas, and whether people like it or not, the history of the Confederate States is one of slavery. Huge portion of the United States were victims of that slavery or descendants of victims of that slavery. And I think that that's something we need to take seriously. So, yeah.
Okay, next I'm going to throw over to Vivian Wolf, and I got to use the bathroom horribly. I drank so much tea. So just try not to break any rules while I'm gone.
Okay, has everybody gone apart from me? Who would be next?
I
be
would.
Supreme?
I would be next.
Okay, just in case he doesn't get back, like, when I'm done. So, geez. Like, a lot of the things that I wanted to say have already been said by like Demon Mama and Northam Age. Like we don't learn our history purely through statues. I mean, I'm a historian, you know, I did a history degree, started on a master's. Don't recall ever having gone to a statue to like learn history. Having said that, there is a certain amount of value to being able to see like historical artifacts or monuments or whatever in their current state, because that allows you to, you know, drink it in and you know, really understand why they were there. But as to why they are there, Demon Mama is absolutely correct. Like the vast majority of Confederate monuments in the United States were built in primarily black neighborhoods during the Civil Rights Movement, deliberately as a symbol to black people that they were like not fucking welcome, basically, that they were second-class citizens. They venerated the heroes of slavery as a way of telling those black people that they should still be slaves. Personally, I don't think that iconoclasm, like in this current state, like it doesn't do a lot except please a lot of people. It's a political statement rather than any kind of healing, and I think that that's a good thing. I would say if I had to add anything to the things that people have said before, it's that iconoclasm is not the erasing of history, it is history in action. These protests and the pulling down of Confederate monuments aren't going to be looked back on as like, oh, we can't see any further back than this. They've torn down all the history. No, this is history happening right now. This is the anger of the oppressed peoples of the United States being meted out upon those monuments of people that oppressed them in the past. So,
okay, next is Supreme.
Yeah, I mean, this one's really easy. I don't think the interpretation of Confederate monuments and memorabilia is subjective at all. I think it's quite objective. You can very easily just go to the explicit statements made by the Confederacy itself. The Vice President Stephen, you can just go to Vice President Alexander Stevens, where he says, the African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization, this was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. This is explicit by the Confederate leadership, okay? He says, they rested on upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. He also says, its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This is explicit from the mouth of babes, from the mouth of the Confederate leadership. If you look at the Articles of Secession for each state, they all mention something similar about African half-civilized people and how they must be enslaved. History is important. It allows us to learn from our mistakes. The Confederacy was a mistake. These statues belong in a museum so that they can be properly contextualized, so that people are not left to worship these statues as heroes or representatives of our culture and our way of life. Let's join together and condemn the actions of slavers and people who would glorify racism and white supremacy and assert it as truth.
Okay, I can see there's a tiny bit of disagreement between the camps. So if anybody wants to engage with another one, you are free to speak up now.
So
You all seem more offended by American historical figures with slaves than modern day actually happening right now slavery.
No, we're
And that's
incredibly
disingenuous
offended
at
by
best.
that. What do you think?
Well, you're
do you
not.
think there's
I mean,
no
you're
Christian abolition
rioting
movement?
over statues and tearing them down and destroying them
No, they're
instead of
not
applying a
rioting
democratic
over
mandate. I'm not done
statues.
talking. Instead of applying a democratic mandate to have these statues removed.
All right.
If these statues had removed, if they were removed through democratic mandate and not torn down illegally by violent fucking rioters, then it wouldn't be that big of an issue. But instead, we have violent rioters that are just destroying these statues, and everybody over there
You should never violently revolt, right? You'd agree that you should never violently revolt.
Wait,
so
wait,
America,
hold on.
America shouldn't be. So America shouldn't be a country.
Absolutely,
Whoa,
I am
okay.
absolutely supporting in violent revolt. If you want to get into that argument, I'll have it all day. I'm probably the only right winger on this show that's going to say, yeah, violent revolt. Let's just go ahead and exercise the demons. But whenever you guys, it's disingenuous and it's not being done appropriately. It's not being done legally.
Wait, sorry, how the
Exercise
fuck is a
demons.
violent revolt supposed to be done legally?
That's not what I'm saying. I didn't say a violent revolt is supposed to be done legally.
I just have one question.
The statue removal is not being done legally.
Wait, no.
People dragging statues through the ground, tearing them apart is federal property. They should go to fucking jail.
If you use the democratic mandate to remove the statues and put them in a museum, it would almost be no deal. Like no one would give a shit. But instead, you go and burn a city down, and then you tear down the statue. And you're like,
why let people vote on them? Because they've let people vote on them.
Okay, everybody. Okay, let's go one at a time. Viv.
Okay, fine. There was that complete fucking dumb fuck statement in the middle of whatever the fuck you just said, right? Where you said that they're rioting over fucking statues. The statues, as
That's
I said,
not what I said. That's not what I said.
That's exactly that is exactly what you said. Go watch the VOD.
Over statues. That's not. I did not say that they were rioting over statues.
Okay, but I haven't.
You
No,
did.
I haven't
Did not.
Yes, you did.
We
Ironically,
really just
all the
we need to move on
leftists
from
saying
this
that I
point.
said
Hold
something
on,
that I
we
didn't say.
really just need to move on to this point. This is honestly not worth addressing, right? Because you can't.
No, it's important to address, right? Because his original contention is that people on the left are not fucking rioting against or objecting against the oppression that is happening now. That was the fucking foundation of his argument. You're all pissed off over statues about shit that happened in the past. You're not pissed off about
It was stupid. Just ignore it, honestly, I think.
Like the demands of like Black Lives Matter involve like all the shit that is happening to black people in the United States now.
The demands of Black Lives Matter are
This
Marxist.
is exactly. You just said the demands. Who the fuck
There's
are they to
another
demand
problem, though.
anything?
There's
Yeah, you
another
don't
problem that I've
negotiate with
You
terrorists.
don't
just because you're-
negotiate. This isn't a
Hold
negotiation.
on. Hey,
I've been the only one
we get off
that.
on just talking about who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist. I have a quick question. Can you confirm to me that all of these statues were installed by democratic process? Because as I understand it, many of these statues were never installed by democratic process. They were put in by a politician, often with a very big bias, believing that this is correct. I believe we already established that many of these statues were installed in historically black neighborhoods.
Yeah, and that's
during
fucked
the
up.
civil rights era. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up. So then, if those weren't installed by democratic process, how can there be an outrage over them being taken down by extra democratic?
Okay, if a private person owns these statues and they get torn down, and the private person doesn't really give a shit, I don't care. Okay, it's because that's private property. I mean, I care because I don't want people's private property to get destroyed. But
then if
in the greater
a biased politician uses his influence or his influence to install a monument to a virulent racist who, as Supreme so nicely established, is a representative of a very racist movement, which was a mistake in our past, then can you not see how that would be problematic? Especially if that politician was doing so targeting minorities who, by definition in the electoral system, may not be able to have their voices heard.
Okay, well, let me address the thing that you were saying a second ago. And the thing that you were saying a second ago is essentially, or what I was getting at is, because some of these are apparently privately owned. Some of them are owned by municipalities, some of them are owned by counties, some are owned by states, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if a specific politician with some kind of vendetta or malice decided to Like, I'm going to use my political favors and I'm going to throw this statue in the middle of the black neighborhood because I just want to fucking put my thumb in their eye. Like, I understand
the original Confederates themselves, right?
Do you want to have a Civil War debate, or do you want to have a statue?
Let's have a Civil War debate. Let's have a Civil War debate.
Agreed.
Because if you're going to keep like worming around whenever we try and like,
fine, let's have a Civil War debate.
You were talking about the Confederacy in connection to Confederate monuments. How dare you take the conversation so far off track?
Anchor, let me ask you: do you take contention with anything that I said? The quotes that I made about the Confederate leadership and their bespoke reasons for wanting to secede from the Union? Do you take any issue with that? Do you think it's historically inaccurate?
No.
Okay, so you
do
agree that
do you take issue with the statement that these monuments were erected to disenfranchise African Americans politically and to make them afraid during the middle of the 19th century? Excuse me, 20th century?
As like an absolute yes.
Okay, the American
maybe like in the majority or large portion.
The American Historian Society or Association made a statement on this saying that exact thing. I'll post it in the Whereby chat in case you want to read up on that. That is right. If you don't believe the American Historical Association, that's that's up to you. But
I don't believe that any association is going to be able to say without doubt that every single one of these monuments were made with a specific intent.
Let me ask you.
If you look in this thread real quick, you will see that it's not only the American Historical Society. It's actually well over a dozen different historical associations have signed off on this statement. By the way,
every single Confederate statue in the country
of the monument building. The bulk here's the quote. Here's the quote. The bulk of the monument building took place in not the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, but in the close of the 19th century into the second decade after the 20th, commemorating not just the Confederacy but the redemption of the South after Reconstruction, right? And was part and parcel of intimidation, the initiation of legally mandated segregation, widespread disenfranchisement across the South. They were intended to obscure the terrorism required to overthrow the Reconstruction.
I will accept that probably a majority of them. Yeah, okay. Sure. That it was done with like some sort of bad intent.
I haven't heard Rob talk about this yet, so I'd like to get Rob's take.
And like the idea that if then we could have a process, and it seems that there's widespread support for getting rid of some of these. So I don't see what the problem would be to just have with that widespread support, clearly supported by almost every major institution at this point that is at least paying lip service to Black Lives Matter, that they would be able to get this on a ballot initiative. Anytime we encourage mobs to, based on their own feelings, even if we think those feelings are legitimate, to take matters in their own hands and destroy property, it's a big mistake. And if you don't mind, Supreme, just a quick question to you. You said that you think that these statues belong in museums?
If they're not going to be destroyed, then yeah, I do actually think that they belong in museums so they can be properly contextualized, so that people aren't left to a subjective.
Contextualized, and someone can explain that they were erected to.
They're not left to a subjective interpretation.
Okay,
right? Thanks, North. I got it.
Jesus Christ.
But then that raises the question of, well, can we properly get them into museums if we have raving mobs that are tearing them down? And then the bigger question to me is that hasn't really been addressed yet is, how does this explain the tearing down of statues such as Thomas Jefferson, such as George Washington? It seems like this.
Roosevelt.
I'll finish real quick. I'll finish real quick. It seems like that a lot of the people tearing down the arguments you all are making.
I can answer this very simply. You don't have to go on. I can answer this very quickly. How does this pertain to tearing down of statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? It's irrelevant because right now we're discussing what to do with Confederate statues. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were not Confederates. Please do not derail this conversation again.
It's just as relevant as the Civil War.
It's completely off topic.
It's
completely off topic.
It's on topic.
It is literally
the topic that it's on is how to fucking initiate logical fallacies
into this conversation and derail it. If the entire other side of this debate thinks it's relevant, then it's fucking relevant.
No.
It's completely
just because a
irrelevant.
lot of stupid people think the same thing does not make that thing true.
Okay, if you think it is, you guys can go have a conversation about it. I will not stop you from going to have a conversation about it.
I mean,
after this one,
we're gonna start criticizing each other and we're gonna start attacking each other. This is ridiculous. I mean, we can all talk like human beings. I mean, there's no need for us to like. I mean, the whole point of this is for us to have a debate, right? Not be criticizing each other Or I mean, I just don't
I
understand.
want to ask the
I'm
left
going to use
a
some.
question.
I'm going to use some executive privilege here. The topic was the tearing down of Confederate statues, but I do think that this is the same basic sphere of like statues being torn down generally across American society. If you wanted to bring it into that, I think that's in the same realm.
And if I could just be real quick, the reason I think it's relevant is a lot of the arguments that some of the people on the left are making are the exact same arguments that are being used to pull down statues of Jefferson.
Yeah, it
abolitionists,
translates
Ulysses
perfectly.
S. Grant. So that's what I'm saying. How do we, once we say it's okay for the mob based on their feelings that they think these statues
Slippery slope.
symbolize racism, why can we then say, well, it's appropriate with the Confederate statues, but not with Thomas Jefferson or George Washington?
Well, sexism will be next,
I
and then
think that,
guys from the early 1900s will be torn
I'm
down.
just-
But
I'm
what's
just
the-
confused.
Hold on 1 second. I just wanted to touch on two quick things. One, which was Republican Nation. I wanted to address you because you brought up that something about people were slinging names. But I will say that the first response that we got from Ankar out of here was to say that people were advocating for terrorism, was to say that people were roving mobs of violent
Burning-
people.
What's the
I think
definition of
that's,
terrorism?
I think that's
Minneapolis.
poisoning the well.
What is the definition of
other-
terrorism?
How is that poison in the well? Have you not seen who's the ones taking down the statues? They're white. They're not even black.
I don't think
They're
that's
majority.
I don't
If you
believe that
look-
you have
look-
the
look at
information to say
some-
that.
Look at
I
some
do
of
not
the
believe that you
videos
have
in
the data or
1996.
videos to actually make that
I
statement.
can see it. I watch it
do
every
not-
day on the news.
I don't
I
believe
watch
that.
this every
Hold
day
on,
on
hold on
the
a second.
news.
I watch
Yeah,
this
wait,
every
wait,
day
but
on
we could
Bright.
all wait a
I'm
second.
looking at a
Hold on.
panel of
Holy
white people.
motherfucking shit.
News. What
The-
news
I
you
mean,
watching on? What news you
I
watching?
watch it. I watch it on Fox News. I watch it on CNN. Yeah, that's the channel I watch. Fox News.
Okay,
That's
let me just tell you something.
The
Let me just
cat-
tell
I
you.
mean, it's just
Listen,
I
ridiculous.
want to know
like
how you
I'm
think
gonna-
this
this
I'm
is
is
a
gonna bring in
panel
a
of all
quote.
white
I'm gonna
people
bring
talking
in a
about
quote.
African
Okay,
people
okay,
and their
everybody,
feelings.
everybody, stop. Okay, Demon Mama, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something that I think that has been sort of brushed over very, very lightly in this conversation. And this is a quote from Martin Luther King, which goes, "A riot is the language of the unheard." This is a well understood thing. People don't just, contrary to the beliefs of some people don't just default to violence by and large. Crowds don't get that mad just for no reason. When you see across an entire nation tons and tons of people getting mad about the same things, and then there are monuments to avowed and outspoken racists all over their city, it makes sense to me that if there is no outlet for those people, if those people are in a minority group and they're not allowed to participate, or they're disincentivized from participating in the electoral process, that people would have to act outside of that electoral process. So with understanding that quote, that a riot is the language of the unheard, perhaps you might consider that a lot of these monuments are intentionally constructed extra democratically in places where they cannot democratically overwhelm the majority, because it's designed to target that minority.
So
do you recognize
the
that that's
democratic process or not?
wait,
Like,
what?
I mean, it's okay. So you've made a couple of things here that I want to get into. First off, I don't think you know what the definition of terrorism
By
is.
the way, when
Secondly-
Ankar's done, it's going to go to Rob. Just want to say that. 'cause we want to get in.
Terrorism.
Secondly, the thing that I'm getting from several of you guys is essentially that might makes right. That these riots.
Wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly
Okay, so
what
hold
we
on.
said.
So if
Let's hear
the
him out.
riots are coercing through force and violence, how is that not? And if riots are
Wait.
the voice
No,
of
no,
the
no, 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 no.
unheard,
Okay. Here's what you wait. Here's why what you said is just dumb, right? Might makes right would assume that like whatever the mob can do is then moral. Our argument is that what the mob is doing is moral, right? It's moral before they did it, not because they did it.
I mean, in my position is ultimately that this is an amoral issue. When people are barred out of a democratic process,
how are they
when they're
barred
not
from the
allowed,
democratic process?
Do you want to go into the history of redlining, into the history of of shutting down voting districts in black neighborhoods? Absolutely. There is
in a county
your essential position.
Rob has been waiting. Let's throw it over the Rob.
That was primarily
Hold on,
in
I
Kentucky.
want to get a clarification.
No, but in Kentucky, just this year, right? Like a precinct or a county that had over 1,200, I believe, like places to poll, only had one in Kentucky this year, and it was a predominantly black county, right? Like gerrymandering and voter disenfranchisement and redlining exist.
Okay,
right?
I don't
know, man. I know several bankers, and they all say redlining is
If I may, real quick, I think that when we're talking about the historical injustices of things like redline, that's been illegal for quite some time. You also find that when it comes to polling stations and things like that, I happen to live in rural Pennsylvania. I have to drive miles. I know many people that can't afford vehicles, and this is predominantly white area, so it's difficult for them to vote as well. But what I wanted to bring up is I often hear about
it's okay to disenfranchise white people.
Well, I often hear about
that's not true at all. I actually do care about
this. Would be this is
the thing.
It's illegal to redline.
Rob wasn't redline. Rob was not finished. Rob was not finished.
I promise. I'll give you a chance, Northmate. I hear about the historical institutional racism, or institutional bigotry, but I would say that almost every major institution we have in this country right now, whether it be political or cultural, is dominated by people that support Black Lives Matter. And so the idea that somehow this is a revolution of oppressed people is nonsense. This is a revolution being supported by Jeff Bezos. It's being supported by almost every Democrat. Many of the Republicans are also supporting it. It's being supported by all of the tech companies. It's being supported by academia. It's being supported by the entertainment industry. So the idea that there's this institutional oppression and people don't have voices that are of the opinion that they want Confederate monuments down is absolutely nonsense.
Do you think the police is predominantly BLM?
I think the people.
Do you think the police are predominantly because
yes. I think the people running them
really, yes. Because that is not played out. In fact, I can tell you, as living in one of the hot spots of this place, I can absolutely tell you that our mayor and our police chief have been literally and violently opposed to BLM. So I don't.
In all the major places we are, such as Minneapolis, such as DC, such as New York, such as Philadelphia, such as Pittsburgh. Even I live in Pennsylvania, so I know for a fact the governor of Pennsylvania, all of them have vehemently supported Black Lives Matter. In fact, there's been so much,
governor of Texas.
Real quick,
how much police reform has happened in those areas?
There's been so much support of Black Lives Matter that we're actually telling people you can't go out because of COVID, you can't go out to your job or you'll kill grandma, and you can't go out and do a certain type of protest.
What the fuck is that got to do
with Black Lives Matter? It's legitimate. That's the institutional power that Black Lives Matter has right now. They're the only people that could get away from the COVID lockdowns. That's how much power they have.
I mean, they can't get away from it, can they? They're met with horrendous police violence.
Right.
They die.
Yes, literally.
We've seen videos all across the country right now, and you're not being fucking either. You've only ever watched Fox News, or you're not being fucking honest if you haven't seen like peaceful demonstrators being attacked by police officers.
I've also
just because the camera angle doesn't.
Yeah, I don't care what you've also seen.
In my town,
that's exactly it. You don't care because you have a subjective view on truth. You only view one side of it.
Hold on. I am fine. I'm fine with both sides. But if you're gonna if you're gonna bring about some random whataboutism to justify the attacks.
Hold on. I want to ask a question real quick, because let me ask you this: there were reopened protests all over this fucking country. I know because I have relatives who went to them. I've had discussions with those relatives, all kinds of shit. I never saw one of those reopened protests get tear gassed. But the moment that somebody protested
down buildings,
there wasn't any violence here in Seattle either. You can literally go and you
guys
can literally
zone.
Listen to me.
You can show me a single example.
I'm still talking.
Okay. Demon Mama,
you do that.
Demon Mama. Thank you. If you go and watch, you can literally watch the footage from live streams of these protests. There was peaceful protest for 5 days that got gassed. In fact, using specifically COVID laws. They were used the state of emergency here in the state to declare a curfew which is they were punishing them specifically. Now, while the reopen people who were out there for haircuts and whatnot did not get cracked down at all, the people who were protesting peacefully, documentedly peacefully, for days here, got gassed and beaten. You can watch the videos of this. I literally challenge any of you who believe that is to be false is a liar.
I think
And
everything
it-
you just said,
I also saw 4 people
I think
get killed in
everything that you
Boston.
just said is exceptionally irrelevant to Confederate statues.
Because
I actually agree. I would actually like to
Yeah,
talk about the
yeah.
question, which was, should we take down Confederate statues and rename military bases named after Confederate generals?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with that.
Sweet.
Okay.
So what do
Well,
you,
I mean,
you
we
guys
can
think?
get back
I
to that.
vote that we should take down Confederate statues and rename military bases of Confederate generals. How do you guys feel about that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Well, but if it's
Okay.
done democratically, I don't think anyone has a problem. But that would make for an awfully
Yeah.
boring.
What if it won't be
segment,
done?
I guess.
What if
I
it
would.
won't be done?
For the record, I would love for it to be done democratically. What I would absolutely love that. If that was in fact, I think that nearly everyone would love that. The problem that we have is that many people are disenfranchised, which is the specific reason why there are so many angry people out in the streets right now, because they're not having their voices heard by any meaningful way.
Wait. You think
Hold on.
those riots were because people don't have the ability to vote?
In some cases, yes.
Oh my
I think that
God.
there is.
We're off the
just-
rails
Oh my
again.
God.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, their votes
How
are
come
being
you-
actively suppressed.
You have
Yeah,
to
This is
people out in the streets for George Floyd?
You can't just
Wasn't
remove.
this whole thing about George Floyd?
Yes, and what is
I
was
mean,
the cause?
what I don't understand is Black Lives Matters comes out every 4 years during an election when there's a white man shooting a black man, but they never go out to Chicago
Hey,
where there's
listen, what
murders
do
every
you
single
think this is?
weekend.
What do you think this platform is? Do you think you're just supposed to come up here and just rant about shit that's bothering you?
Listen,
Don't you
I'm
want
not
to engage in
ranting.
the actual
I-
question that's being asked?
Listen, I'm not ranting. I have tried to speak, and I never get to get my full sentence in, so I do it
Because your
silent.
mic is actual.
Gotta say,
fucking,
your
like
mic, you need to,
nails on
turn the
my
thing a little bit
ears.
down more. It's still peaking. If you could turn it down a little bit more. Okay, 1
Is
second.
that better?
A little bit more. A little bit
I
more.
want to know specifically
better?
what.
That's
how
much
these,
better, much
I'm
better.
Sorry.
No,
sorry.
turn it down a bit more.
He's just talking quieter. He's not
Yeah,
actually turning the
you're
game
so
down.
funny.
But
It-
Supreme,
it
if I
should-
could just say
I
real
feel like it's
quick-
really telling.
Fucking mute button.
This is really telling. Like we're being asked a question about whether or not we should take down Confederate statues, and like we
And
just keep
everybody's just
derailing
ranting
from
about
that.
Black
Nobody
Lives
wants
Matter.
to
With
engage
the
with that.
with
Yeah,
the
nobody wants to
Confederate
address that.
statues thing, as
I-
far as Confederate
have-
statues, if it's done democratically and they vote, I honestly
me-
wouldn't
let
care.
me ask you
like
this.
if you
Let me
didn't
ask you
destroy
this.
them.
Democratically, if we reinstituted slavery democratically, would you support that?
Yeah,
Would I
isn't that?
support it?
Are
No.
you
Yeah.
just here to talk
If it's
about
done
whatever you want?
democratically.
Wait a minute. Didn't you
No.
just say we can only talk about the statute? So what's this?
What? He's
Yeah.
he's drawing a hypothetical.
That's
right.
This is how you
build an argument.
Exactly.
Wait,
No, listen,
wait.
I'm only
Analogy.
making the point that the way a discussion goes is it logically goes off in other areas. That's all I'm saying. Supreme's right to ask questions like this. I don't have a
No,
problem.
but he's
you
not. He's
should
not asking
hold
a different
off.
question. He's not changing
It
the
is.
topic.
It
He's not
is.
changing the
It
topic.
is.
I've let you talk. I've let you go on a fucking
Oh,
soliloquy for 5 fucking minutes, kid. Like, listen to the sound of my fucking voice. It's not a different fucking
Put on
topic.
my
It's a
robe and
hypothetical drawn as an analogy, not
I
a
mean,
fucking
that's
separate
exactly-
topic.
That's exactly
I'm
what the other side was
specifically
doing.
asking
When
if
we
you're-
were saying, well, what?
No,
Well, no.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
specifically asking you if your position extends, the conditions by which you are drawing your position extend to other positions.
This
I
is
would-
the answer to that.
I wouldn't be-
There are things that are so repugnant that we don't have to rely on democratic process to end them. Slavery would be one of them. However, when you're
I would
talking
like
about
to
an
hope
issue
that it
that's
would
not-
never pass.
Right. If
Hold
we're
on.
talking
Can you say
about-
that again,
You're
Rob?
against slavery. You
Yes,
should be out
there
there
are
with
issues
Black
that are so
Lives Matter right
repugnant,
now.
such as should you be
Oh,
allowed to take
bullshit.
someone's
do you
fundamental
mean, oh,
rights
bullshit?
guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, such as slavery? Should you be allowed to take them away? That is something that we do not need the democratic process to be able to fight against, because it's guaranteed rights to in
agree.
the Bill of Rights. But the statute, I think, is not an issue that meets that
Okay.
threshold.
Yeah, and I
That's
don't
all.
Well, let
think
me-
that
let
the
me-
statues
hold
are
on.
a constitutional issue.
Well,
either,
let
which
me ask-
slavery
Hey,
would be.
Logic,
Let me-
thank you for the rated 29. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Hey, let me ask you why you think that, Rob, because we're talking about statues that glorify the legacy of men who put on war coats and went to war to defend their right to participate in slavery. Why do you think this is not as repugnant as slavery?
Because it's a statue as opposed to physically enslaving a person. Like, by the same
Hold on,
token,
hold
I
on.
can say,
Ah.
Why do we
Wait,
that's
I think
contextual.
why do
that
we
was
erect
misleading.
statues in
Hold
public
on,
in public
hold on. I think
places?
that was slightly misleading. Wasn't Lee staunchly anti-slavery?
What, Robert
I-
E. Lee?
Wasn't he?
No.
I don't know. If
Are
that's,
you
it's,
sure? Because I'm about to look this up. If you're wrong.
He wasn't anti-slavery enough to not fight for an entire country that was breaking the Constitution, seceding from the Union in order to fight right for slavery, as Supreme quoted earlier.
For what I remember, with regards to Lee specifically, just with this specific individual, he was staunchly anti-slavery, and he went to Virginia begrudgingly and not happy, simply because Virginia was his home.
He was only a begrudging traitor and terrorist.
Hold on. I also want to have a God, I don't even remember what I wanted to ask him. Oh, I kind of remember, but I'm not going to be able to flesh it out well enough. But
yeah,
we got some downtime.
Yeah. So I was thinking about the thing that I was going to ask Supreme earlier, which is essentially,
Ankar, if I can step in,
into the might right
I have
thing.
to disagree with you here, Ankar, because if your position is the Confederates were basically terrorists fighting against the United States, I don't think someone did it begrudgingly.
That's not my position.
I know that's not exactly your point, but I just think
I've never made that point.
No, Robert E. Lee's personal feelings on slavery, I think, are totally irrelevant. Is all I'm saying.
It's not irrelevant because essentially what's being said is that these people supported slavery, and therefore
they fought to keep.
He was statues are important.
For a group that tried to secede and went to war with the United States to protect slavery. His personal feelings, if he was writing in his journal, I don't really like slavery. He still was the lead general in a group that seceded and tried to fight the United States. So, I mean, I'm just saying, look.
He still believed in white superiority. Like whether or not
Lincoln believed in white superiority.
Yeah, why is that? Why do you say of course? Of course he did.
But I would just like to get back to the point. I don't understand what I said was consensuous. That a statue is as equally offensive as the institution of slavery.
It's definitely not. It's definitely not, and that if anything is hyperbole. But it is similarly offensive, right? And it's meant to disenfranchise black people.
You don't have the freedom to be free of offense. Like just because something upsets you doesn't mean
if something is overtly What is the reason? What is the reason to keep them? What's the reason to keep them?
I think the main thing the main point that most of us are making as far as the reason to keep them, is that it's not being done legally.
Okay, but that's not the question being asked. The question is, should they be taken down?
Yeah.
Should they be taken down?
Depends on the people that live there. I don't think that the federal government should mandate
we're asking you then. That's why we're narrowing down here, right? Isn't it so abhorrent that it should be done, albeit agreed democratically, because democratic institutions are obviously like they're better and you have more the will of the people being excised, and that's a really good exercise, and that's a good thing, right? Everyone would agree that that's a good thing, I hope. Right, but we're not. That's not the discussion. Whether or not to do it democratically, we can have the discussion, but should it be done at all? You're saying no.
Right. I would say it's up to the people that live there. I don't look at them every day.
It should be up to the racists who live there.
What do you think? Do you think they should be taken down, Anchor?
I don't know, man. I don't live near one.
Okay.
I don't really.
Well, I'm asking you if you think they should be taken down.
I will answer as best I can. Okay. I will answer as best I can. And that is that I don't remember how long ago. I'm sure someone in here will remember this better than I do. But a couple of years ago, they started to remove statues in New Orleans. I did not like it at all.
Why?
Okay.
I don't remember, and I think that was actually done democratically.
So your answer is no.
Council.
Your answer is no, then, right?
If I have to pick an answer, I'm going to go with no. Yeah.
Okay. You think Confederate statues should stand in public spaces?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, then, Supreme, can I ask you?
If they're there, I don't support putting up a new one.
Supreme, can I ask
if they're there,
you and the left a question, like an honest question, good faith question. I live near Gettysburg. Do you think that it's worth having Confederate monuments up at a historical battlefield like Gettysburg?
If it's like a public park and they can be properly contextualized and it's not just up there for people to just behold and then be left up for some subjective interpretation, I'm okay with public parks and national parks where they have tour guides that help contextualize and teach our history. That sounds fine. That would be equivalent to a museum as me.
It just seems a little odd to me.
There's an issue with the conceptualization of it because you guys keep using this term, and I think that there is a
Anchor. I think you need to just sit down for a minute so we can
conceptualize.
talk about some stuff.
I realize you're having trouble with the definitions of words and
if I could just say, I wrote down
and everything else.
Rob wanted to finish through with that, and Anchor, you're allowed to talk. Rob.
Yeah, and I wrote down stuff that all of you said in your opening statements. North Mage, I think you correctly point out that there was a lot of failing to rebuild the country after the Civil War. A lot of that has to do with a lot of animosity still from people that lived in the South that felt that they had towns that were completely wiped out by the Union, and they were upset about that. A lot of the Confederate pride had to do with that type of thing. So I'm not, again, I personally would probably say I wouldn't want Confederate.
But here's where I differ from that, right? The problem with the United States as compared to, let's say, Germany about their crimes, right? Their crimes against humanity is that we don't have this collective sense of shame about it, right? It's not collective enough to tear down statues like this democratically because we don't feel shame about it, right? We're like, oh, let's preserve the history of it, the culture of it. The culture of statues meant to terrify black people so that they didn't vote, so they got disenfranchised, so they couldn't stare the statues down in the first place, to let them know that they weren't welcome there in the first place. Reconstruction failed. The answer to that Reconstruction failing isn't, hey, let's appease the racist people. It's no, let's pressure them until everyone pressures them so that they can't feel as if this is an acceptable way to think, feel, or act.
But again,
right? They have to, social pressure has to tell them this is unacceptable, and we aren't currently giving that as a message when we allow these statues to exist, live, and be enshrined, right? When traitors and racists and slavers are being put up in marble around our cities, we're sending the wrong message.
Why are you using the present tense for that? They're not being put up.
They were
actually, I believe it was
current
one put in within like the last 10 years.
Yeah,
like some of these are actually fresh.
2010, I think, was the one.
And
the most recent one I was aware of.
Let me remedy that. When they aren't being torn down, we are sending the wrong message. When they're allowed to stand.
Yeah,
but again,
I mean, like, it's a simple like, here's the thing. Slavery is atrocious. It's disgusting. It's horrifying. The fact that there would be masses of generations of people who were forced very violently to be subservient to others, and then that we would then erect statues that are to honor that. That's horrible. Like,
I think that the statues were to honor slavery.
What are they to honor?
Or even if they were like put up that way, that's not how I've ever interpreted them.
Okay, how do you interpret a statue of a Confederate general, Anchor?
I think it's easier for me to answer. How do I interpret the like Dixie Pride thing, which is kind of like analogous or a parallel, and it's just a
Dixie Pride.
Well, I don't know how to. I'm trying to answer now without whatever.
I mean,
but like the whole Dixie Southern flag nonsense, it's.
Do you think there might be a difference between somebody like interacting with a Confederate statue or a statue of a Confederate slaver? That they might that somebody whose family may have been enslaved might have a very different interaction with that type of statue than somebody who was totally unaffected by it? Because that seems pretty important.
Can I jump in? I think that something that's kind of, I think that if hopefully we could agree on this, that statues could mean different things to different people. Is it beyond the pale that there could be someone who is from the South whose family fought in the Civil War, but thinks that slavery was abhorrent, but still says, I'd like my ancestors to be remembered?
If your family fought in the Civil War, they fought for slavery, and you should be like, Grandpappy was a fucking dickhead, and I'm glad he's dead.
That's
so not necessarily.
That's a really bad
we could say that. I mean, that's a one-sided view of history. I could understand.
I have an answer for this.
Sure.
I do have an answer for this. So I think that this is true today. The reason that a lot of people in the South today look at the Confederate flag as this benign symbol, or one that does not explicitly purport white supremacy or slavery or racism or anything like that, is because Confederate sympathizers have co-opted people of the South to think that it's a greater representation of Southern values, things that I think Southern people are proud of, that they have. I don't think they should not feel any shame in being proud of, but the South has been co-opted by Confederate sympathizers by being told that Confederate monuments and Confederate memorabilia, for example, are representations of the region that they are from, and like other values that are not slavery, and so on and so forth. It's a failure of our education system. That's why I think we need to just properly.
Might be valid today, though.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's not valid today because, again, I read to you the explicit musings of the Confederate leadership.
No, I'm not saying that it wasn't valid at the time, and that it wasn't, the administration of the South was not solely about slavery, and that the governors in the state and all that it was not a war with regards to slavery. The thing that I'm saying is I don't think that co-opting process that you're talking about is necessarily it applies to everybody from the South in 2020 America.
But let's assume it does, right? Like, I have 2 points in this. I'll save the second point because everyone will yell when I say it. But Supreme, to your point, let's assume that's true, that it's been co-opted. So then, wouldn't it be a better system than to then get rid of these statues and the flags and things like that by saying, look, we're going to have votes, and it's clear that there's public support now to change the ability of these statues being here. When you have mobs go and rip those statues down undemocratically, all it does is the extremist on the right, it allows them to get more power because they say, see, you didn't even have a voice in this.
Agreed. We don't support the mob. We don't support the mob. I don't think anyone, maybe Vivian supports the mob here. But the question, and that's fine, and I actually support the mob as well, but that's not the question, right? The question is not whether or not the mob, right, is justified here. It's whether or not they should be torn down.
I mean, what I think should happen is
no one is disagreeing with you right now.
So it's not it's not reasonable.
Before Supreme, I'll throw it back to you. I have another moderator in here because it did get intense a little bit. If a Frenchman speaks up, because he's another mod in here. Okay. I gotta use it.
Who wouldn't listen to a Frenchman?
Okay. So I talked about how it's a failure of our education system to properly educate people really throughout the country, because I'm a Yankee. I'm from Michigan, right? And I was not properly educated on exactly how explicitly racist the motivations of the Confederate States were, right? I think a lot of Americans are well, not guilty of this, but I think a lot of Americans fall under this umbrella of not having been properly educated on the actual explicit motivations of the Confederacy. So in this case, I place higher expectations on local governments to have a better understanding of this than the average voter, right? So I think, in my opinion, like, if a statue like this has stood and the local institutions have been complacent in it for long enough, I do think it's justified for people to be like, hey, this is fucked up. Like, maybe you guys don't all understand what this statue means and what it stands for, especially erecting it in a public place. If you're not going to do anything about it, if you're going to let this reprehensible imagery just stand in our faces every day, then yeah, we are going to do something about it. It's public property. Okay. We're the public.
Okay, real quick. So any slaveholder that would go for? Any statue of a slaveholder?
Well, we're talking about Confederate statues, but if we're talking about slaveholders, I do think that there is, the reason that history is important is because it allows us to learn from our mistakes. Owning slaves is one that I don't think we need to contextualize and make remissions for and make excuses for people as like it being the culture of the time, or more excusable because, oh, what were they going to do or whatever. First off, I'm not that married to the idea of statues. I don't think statues are magical fucking mono-regenerating, units or something.
I mean, it depends on the construction of the statue, actually. But
okay, fair enough. Okay, if it's made of shungite, maybe, yeah, it has some, protective properties. But otherwise, I don't think it's, I don't think destroying a statue does anything to anybody. I don't think anybody suffers if you destroy a statue. Like, if I'm being perfectly clear.
Okay,
if you're asking me what I think the best thing is to do...
Just as a clear-cut answer, just asking for, and again, a hypothetical in the vein that you asked of whether or not we think slavery needed democratically to be rejected. That's all this is, a hypothetical in that vein. So just a clear answer. So do you think that if local precincts allow a statue of a slave owner to be up, then it would be justifiable for people to take matters in their own hands and rip it down?
I mean, I think it could be.
I think it could be. Justification of violence, which is essentially... That's essentially
wait, hold on. No. Because there is intentionally removing the context from that changes the question, right? Because it's a very different question if you say, hey, this statue, which many of them were installed in non-democratic ways. If a statue is installed, a monument to hatred and enslavement is installed in a non-democratic way, I think that there is a very good case that could be made that it could be taken down in a non-democratic way.
There's a better
they're
case.
Blocked. But I don't think that you can make I don't think there's a single one-size-fits-all for all these monuments. We'd have to look at the individuals. But taking down the monument in general,
I think that there's a better case to be made that we can do it better than people 100 years ago, and we can do it democratically.
I mean, I don't.
But if it's not being done democratically, I mean, I think a Confederate statue is technically hate speech, if we're being clear. And I do think that hate speech is something that there currently exist protections for groups of people.
But again, here's the problem. Here's what I would say, and here's a problem with hate speech.
Well, no, because I keep feeling like you guys are. I feel like you guys keep angling to try and make it seem like, oh, there's this mob rule thing, but it's like, no, like, what do you if people are being if statues, which many of these were historically like factually installed by non-democratic means, then how do you justify, like, did you see what I'm saying
By
there? Like
being better people.
No.
yeah, but if people, you can't tell me that you don't know that, like, that all these places have never tried to have them democratically removed. In fact, I could tell you by fact, I've been in places where attempts have been made, and because the petitioning group is a minority group, they literally cannot assemble the votes necessary to get rid of a monument devoted to hating them.
Well, that's not
because
true
people
right
don't,
now.
that's not because people want the monument. That's because people don't care enough. People are apathetic, right? People aren't actively racist. They're just not anti-racist, right? And so they don't think that it's an issue, so they don't actually engage in the behavior required in the activism required to remove these statues. But in the vast majority of cases, you'll agree that it's apathy, isn't it? Most people just don't care.
Right. Same with Black Americans. Most of them didn't care. I agree, though, and it could be a problem. Like, I'm not saying that to be short with you or anything. And
I really believe that. Agreed, but if most people don't care, it's probably because, right? Let's try and figure out why. Is that because
poorly educated?
Right? Is that because they're poorly educated, or is that because they oppose it? Right? It's probably because they're poorly educated.
They don't understand. Not only is their country like built on fucking slavery, but they support and enshrine slavery in their constitution to this very fucking day. The people in here saying they fucking oppose slavery, every single one of them should be out on the streets with Black Lives Matter right now protesting against
Black Lives Matter.
Mass incarceration.
I am almost fucking done, all right? Protesting against that unfair treatment by the judiciary, by law enforcement, that results in millions of Black people being.
How does this relate to statues?
Well, the point is that slavery is ongoing.
No,
right?
In the United States. It's an outrageous statement. It's a misuse. It ignores data. What this does is it looks at data.
What is slavery? What is slavery to you? What is slavery to you?
You don't even need data for this shit, buddy. All you need to recognize that there are.
Well, the data actually does support the position that slavery exists.
Wait. Let me fucking finish, right? You don't need statistics, right? Is what I'm fucking saying. All you need to know, right, is that there are people in the United States right now who are incarcerated and working without pay or with very, very low pay, right? That they are forced into doing that work. Right?
Execute them instead.
Of slavery. What a fucking really smart statement, dude. I'm so glad you fucking
incarcerated. They're not there. They're not there because they're good people, okay? And none of you can speak. Listen.
Yeah, they broke the law, so we should treat them like chattel.
Listen, I went to
fucking idiot.
Fuck you. I went to prison. I served 2 years in federal prison.
Is that why
I know this subject? I know this subject. This subject, none of you know from personal experience. I do. Okay, and the people that are in prison deserve to be there. Maybe
not all of them. Not all of them. Not all of them do.
Listen, I was with them.
Because you're a piece of shit doesn't mean everyone is.
Fuck you! Don't call me a piece of shit. You don't know me.
You don't.
Ridiculous fucking hat.
I think that's genuinely. First of all, it's objectively false. We know that people are falsely charged. That is objectively false.
A very small percentage. Okay. I'm not saying that. You guys didn't let me get to the point of saying maybe a 95%.
I know you're mad.
Okay.
Maybe a 95%.
He was trying to get to a point. Let's let him finish.
I never get to speak or finish my full sentence. I served 2 years in federal prison. I was around every single type of criminal you can think of. 95%, at least 95 to like 97% of the people in there were guilty.
I believe that statistic. That's not an anecdote.
Okay, so for people to say that prisoners,
I actually had the stats pulled up for this in advance. I just thought that it might go here, but hold on. 74% of people held by jails are not convicted of any crime.
What do you mean?
How does that grab you?
No. I'm talking about federal prison. Don't talk about jail. Talk about federal prison. I'm talking about my personal experience. Okay, talk to me about, because it's a 98% conviction rate. So in federal prison.
But Supreme, can you
Sure.
post that post where you're saying
Is-
that? And that jail is
Yeah.
slightly different than prison.
I'm not
Like,
buying
you
that at all.
go
That's
to
true.
jail
That's
as a
true.
whole thing,
In
right?
jail, you're waiting.
Not as
trial.
relevant. It's a bit of a
You're
it's
waiting-
a bit
you're
it's a
waiting
bit
to
dog
see-
whistly because they
and-
don't like they're not subject to the same labor.
And to get out of
Like-
and to get out of jail, right, and to get a lesser sentence, you might have to take a plea deal or whatever. You know,
Yeah,
plenty of
yeah,
people
yeah,
don't.
that's-
Plenty of people
yeah.
don't even go to fucking trial, right? Plenty of people
No,
haven't
the majority
actually
don't.
been properly fucking convicted. And
No,
yet
no,
they-
the majority don't. The majority. That's why their ratings are so high.
Yeah, but
the majority of people
hold
plead
on.
guilty.
Yeah.
I
Let me just-
pled.
Can I bring something up? that
But
you said?
listen, but let
Can
me
I-
finish my train of thought because I was interrupted. I'm just trying to finish my. So when I was in prison, I experienced a lot of different cultures. I mainly hung out with African Americans while I was in prison because I was in a prison that was full of pedophiles, drug dealers, and there was not many Hispanics. So I mean, the only people I could socialize with was African Americans. So I hung out with a lot of them, and the majority of them admitted to me that they were guilty, and they were actually telling me that they had another bit in them,
That's
which
also
mean-
fucking anecdotal.
Are you
It's so
trying
irrelevant.
to insinuate
Like,
as well that
I
like just
literally don't
because the
even-
race indicates what crime that they're likely to be convicted
He's
of?
saying he couldn't hang out with
No,
the
no.
Peckerwoods, is what he's saying.
I couldn't hang out with the white people because the majority of them were pedophiles.
Well, but almost
That's what I'm trying to
almost
say.
half. Hold on, almost half of people. in
That's
federal
really
prisons-
racist, man.
Hold-
I'd walk.
Listen,
that
that's not
If-
racist. It's
hold
a
on.
fact.
If you want
I'm
to talk
looking
about
up on
federal
the internet.
prisons, hold on. If we want to talk about federal prisons, over half of the people in federal prisons are there for drug-related.
Yeah, and
incidents.
and pedophiles. Check out. Okay,
Well,
check
no,
out Peter.
no.
pedophiles aren't
Check out-
pedophiles
check
are not
out-
a majority of
What?
like or even like a
What? I
plurality.
was in a yard with 1,600 people.
Yeah, that's
and the-
incredibly anecdotal, man. You're in
No,
one federal
no, no.
prison, dude.
No,
Can
no,
I say one thing?
1,600,
Why-
and out of 1,600, 900 were
Okay.
sexual offenders.
It has
Okay,
to,
okay.
That's a
even
big
if they
statistic.
are guilty, it doesn't take away from the fact that like if they're being forced to do labor, they're fucking slaves,
They're
dude. Like
not forced.
it's fucking-
They get
fucking
paid.
irrelevant.
But
They
listen,
get paid.
listen,
I
listen,
had to. I had
Everybody's
to.
been wanting to
I
say
had to
something,
plead
and
to get paid.
Tiberius, you need to calm down and talk a little less, okay, Tiberius? Okay, Demon Mama.
Listen, I just want to bring a little bit of attention to something that started this whole little offshoot, which is that Vivian Wolf brought up the idea that slave labor or very close to slave labor is being used in prisons, and the Republican nation's response was, "Who gives a shit? I was in prison." So if that's in fine, why the fuck should we listen to you about anything by your own? That was literally his response. Yes, it was.
Very few
watch.
compelled labor prisons in America anymore, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, no,
You get paid.
Like the one
When
in
you go to
Louisiana was
federal
one of the
prison, you
last.
get paid.
Yeah,
When
how
you go to
much-
federal prison,
how
you
much
choose
you get paid? How
whether
much
This is
you get
something
paid?
that I know very, very
you
close.
choose whether
because-
you want to work or not. It's not
Listen,
mandatory.
I
You
lived in
choose.
the middle of California, in the middle of a wildfire season, in one of the states that has been most criticized for the private prison industry. This is something I've covered extensively on my
This
channel.
feels
It's one of the
anecdotal.
This isn't anecdotal. Wait, what do you mean anecdotal? I'm telling you the qualification of where I'm coming from with this. What the fuck are you talking about? The point is if you can literally go find this information right now. Prisoners are not given basic necessities in California, and they are then pressured very strongly by the means that they will not have necessities if they don't go work, and they are put out to go work at firefighters, people who have done all kinds of different crimes. It doesn't matter what crime they did. So if your position is that the second that somebody enters a prison because of doing a crime, whatever that crime may have been, they just suddenly lose their value or their human value, that sounds to me like you're basically just justifying slavery.
It sounds
Like if you
like
just
the
think,
Democratic supermajority needs to fix its state prisons.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
what-
yeah,
I
sure.
would
Agreed.
Agreed.
Like,
May I jump
Agreed.
in real quick?
Well, we
if I-
don't have
I-
a Democratic
I agree.
supermajority because we have a Republican
it
president,
sounds
though,
I
like
right?
jump in-
people like you.
Well, Democratic supermajority in California.
Rob wanted to say something?
Yeah, just real quick. Like, I kind of agree with you on the left in this sense that, as a Republican, I think one of the greatest shames in our country is that prison rape is so common that we joke about it. That's disgusting. Our prison, I don't care what crimes people are convicted of. The fact that our prisons are such a deplorable condition, such as that, is something that I think all of us should say needs to be fixed. Now, I don't think this is directly akin to slavery, and I think what Republican Nation's saying, there is some truth to it. You're not forced to work. You could choose if you wanted to do the worst thing.
If
which
you're
would be
if you're not given the necessities, right, that you need, right,
You
to
are
live like a reasonably
given.
No, but if you're not, I'm not saying your experience, right? I'm saying in California, right? This is what Demon Mama is saying. If you're not given basic necessities, right, and right, the alternative is like don't have like toilet paper, right, or work for. And I'm not sure if that's a good example. You can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But like not having toilet paper or working, right? People are gonna have to choose, right, to not have shit covering them constantly.
I mean, if that type of stuff's happening, it's
I mean, if that's happening, that's not even prison because there's certain things that they're supposed to give you.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
toilet
talking
paper is
about.
provided.
Agreed. And that would this be the first time that someone's breaking the law?
This is a long tangent. I mean, like, there is a conversation to be had here about.
I mean, in prison, I was given everything. I mean, I had money because my family was giving me money. So I was blessed that I didn't have to work like the jobs.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it's not white privilege because I'm Hispanic. Just so you know.
Disregard everything that you say because you were once a prisoner, and as we know, in your own words, who gives a shit?
So
you know why? Because I can actually admit that I should have gone to prison.
I would rather go to David in your
don't like to admit is that they belong there.
Okay.
I belong there. I committed a crime and I deserve the punishment.
If I could just say real quick, my point is just that I don't know the specifics of what you're talking about, Demon Mama. I'm not going to say if that's happening, it's appalling. I don't think that that's akin directly to slavery. There's various reasons why, but it's still, regardless of what we're going to call it, it's terrible and it's something that needs solved.
Yeah, everybody should agree. Everybody should agree with
marker. I'm putting a marker here. We got 10 minutes left on this topic, so just try to wrap it up generally before going.
So Tiberius can talk.
Can I just make?
I mean, I can jump in if you really want me to, but I mean, okay. All right. Number one, I'm from Indiana. My side fought on the Union. I don't have a Confederate statue within at least 100 miles of me.
Mike is like it's like a ton of wind in it. Like in a storm.
I'll fix that in 10 seconds.
Okay.
He's got to turn off his wind machine.
Wow, amazing!
It's getting really hot in here. I can feel the heat coming through the computer with all this shit. Okay.
Typhooning
all right.
this.
So sorry about that. Are you guys better?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm from Indiana. I don't have a Confederate statue within 100 miles of me. My side was on the Union. I don't see this as my issue. Now, if I wanted to put my opinions and whatever into the issue, it's completely ethical arguments, and I really hate to make ethical arguments for social policy. That being said, I really do side with the left on this one. I don't particularly care for the Confederates. I think history gave us a shit deal with Lincoln getting killed, to where if he hadn't, I'm pretty sure most of the Confederates would have been deconfederized. We would probably killed half their leaders. They would have been occupied for 20 years. Completely different history. We got fucked. So where are we now? Well, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm not a fan of the Confederates. I say tear them down personally. But again, I don't feel like this is my issue. This is not my community. I'm not there. I don't feel like putting my ethical sensibilities on people who, I'm not affected by, is a little morally obtuse for me.
Do you think that you're actually right, like living in a society that's affected by this? Do you think that you're not right, like, ooh, we live in a society, but like, do you think that you're actually not affected by this in any way, right? Like that it's not contributing to a culture that you're a part of, right? That is worse off as a result.
It's a really interesting question, and I can't give a definitive yes or no to that.
Okay.
It's one of the. Go ahead.
Like we said, that most people are just uneducated about it. So it seems oftentimes one of the side effects of bringing this stuff up is it opens wounds to people that really, on all sides of the issue, didn't really care. Now they didn't care for 8 years under Obama, and now all of a sudden it's the biggest issue in the world.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree there. It's definitely some serious open wounds. The problem is even among like the black community here, and they're not a lot. It's 90% white in the state. They don't really talk about this as an issue. They've got wealth inequality, they've got healthcare, they've got education. That's what's on their plate. And so this conversation isn't really being had here for me. So I'm not jumping up and down to actually do all this because it's, just not part of my thing. If we need to have this as the national discourse, do we put it up on the world stage? I can get behind that, but I mean,
it's not a kitchen table issue.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said here between the feds and the states. Huh?
Like the idea that people weren't talking about this for the last hundreds of years that these statues have stood since the most
of them go up in the 60s.
Yeah, but I mean, however many years it's been, we're talking all this. The idea is that these aren't issues for many people. Is just that it indicates your ignorance. Like there are
come
it's
on.
not.
Hold on.
Just because it's not a dinner table issue for you doesn't mean it's not a dinner table issue for Black people who might be
Are you Black?
No,
So how
but that
do you
doesn't
know?
wait. I'm not making
I
making any
confident.
claim one way or another. I'm saying you can't say it's not a kitchen table issue unless, like, when there are when it's very clear that these people, like many people who've spoken out on this, have actually themselves said, "Hey, like this is something we've been talking about for a long time." And
Yes,
regardless,
small vocal
even,
majority or minority.
Hold on though. But by definition, because we are a white majority country, just by chance, by demographic, there is any Black people who speak out about the statue being dangerous to them are going to be a vocal minority. You can't just write them off because of that. Do you see how that's a problem?
I grew up
Like, that's what I'm trying to.
Growing up, I went to school in a 70% Black school, and I can tell you I never heard of this growing up. I played sports.
Oh, well, that solves it then. Okay,
years.
everybody needs to
I'm
go
just
home.
telling you.
Anchor grew
Anecdotally,
up and went to a school with Black people in it.
like I was immersed. Like I grew up in the South in a school that was 70% Black. Played sports for 6 fucking years. I never heard this being an issue.
Oh, good point.
Oh man,
If somebody hasn't talked, you know what? Even if he's right, it's fucking irrelevant, right? Because like we recognize that there are like issues in our society all the time that like
Yes,
we might
I
not recognize
understand.
earlier
You're
on.
going to be outraged on someone's behalf. I get it.
That's not what I said. You fucking dipshit! Shut up and stop getting all snowflakey every time I open my mouth.
Wow,
Fuck
kinda
me,
angry,
you guys.
aren't you?
But can I just say?
Listen,
try to deflate this a little?
Wait,
Oh,
I was
go
trying to
ahead,
say
Billy.
something.
let her
before
finish.
the fucking dipshit interrupt. We recognize that there's things wrong with our society and then try and change them all the fucking time, right? Like for the longest fucking time, I'm pretty sure nobody really brought up the fact that like women couldn't vote, for instance, because they were all like Bible believing fucking Christians, and they were like, well, you know, women probably shouldn't have the power, and women's place is to like serve her husband and shit, right? But like as we go forward, we identify things that are like causing people harm, and then we try and propose solutions for them. Just because we didn't recognize there was a problem, I think that some people probably did. But even if you're right and people
Lots of
didn't
white
recognize it
liberals.
was I don't care. Even if we didn't recognize that it was a problem before, right, that doesn't mean that it isn't a problem
If
now.
it wasn't a
So the
problem
harm
before,
has
you have
demonstrated.
created the problem.
Or it was a problem
Do
that
you-
people weren't
I-
addressing.
did you not
There's
hear-
another
no, did you
alternative
not-
there.
I believe
Did
that
you
it
not hear
possibly
my-
was
did
a
you not hear
problem
my
that was not being
example of women
addressed.
not
But I'm
being
telling
able
you,
to vote?
I personally, like, I never heard of this being a kitchen
and
table
I
issue.
grew up, and when I went to middle school, right, in a district,
focused
right?
on feelings,
No, but
we're
when I
not
went
focused on
when I went to
harm.
middle school in a district, same as you, right? It was I believe it was 80 or 85% African American in my school system. I didn't hear about it either. That's also because we don't teach it, right? We don't teach that there are these statues being erected to terrify Black people, right? And like people don't know about that.
But
They
then
were
they're not-
erected like largely right in the later half of the 20th century as a terror campaign against African Americans. If they knew, I'm sure they would be outraged by it. But right, the fact is that our education system is bad,
And I would
especially in
wholeheartedly
in
support-
areas that are primarily minority
And I would
focused because right, they
wholeheartedly
divert
support
resources away from
Okay,
it.
And I
May
would
I anchor?
wholeheartedly support looking into the origin of them, and if that is the case,
Cool. We've looked
making
into
a public
the origin.
awareness
That is
and
the case.
having a democratic mandate instead of mob rule terrorism, and might is right.
Rob has been wanting to talk.
Yeah,
a
if
little
I
bit.
may, Vivian, I think
Can I
that
go?
I understand what you're saying, but there's again we're conflating a statue with not allowing someone to have a human right, such as voting, or we're conflating a statue with slavery. Those are
Is it a conflation? Is it a conflation
no.
when it was designed? Is it a conflation when it was designed specifically to disenfranchise African American voters?
The point is, right? This ain't about like armor feels or got all super offended at the statue on behalf of Black. No, the reason that these two situations are analogous are because I think that we can prove that there is a certain amount of harm done by women not being able to vote, and that there is a certain amount of harm by venerating the the defenders of slavery. I think that both things you can prove are harmful, and that's the reason we should take it forward. Not because some people are like, oh, it kind of hurts my fifis, right? Like, there's a reason it fucking hurts their feelings, and it hurts their feelings because it's like harmful to them in a wider context.
Again, but
Republican Nation, you wanted to.
I know we're going to
Okay.
move on, but
Yeah, Republican Nation really been wanting to say
oh,
something.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay, just to make it clear, I don't have any issues with statues being relocated to like Supreme said originally, relocate them to a place where maybe people that like history, they like specific history, not that they're racist or anything like that. I just don't like the way the people are going about it. I don't like the fact that we're allowing people to just tear down statues, destroy property. I just don't like the way they're going about it. There's ways of doing things in a non-violent
you've changed
way.
your mind. So you've changed your mind. We shouldn't protect the culture of it by keeping the statues up. We should remove them and put them elsewhere.
It was never about culture. It was about the history of it. I never said culture. I never mentioned the culture of it.
Okay. My fault.
Yes. So it was always about the fact that it just played a part in our nation's history. I mean, you go into I was in New Orleans. I went to the World War II museum. You see Nazi stuff there. You see American history stuff there. I mean, it's just, I don't like the way they're doing it, vandalizing it, tearing it down. There's other ways. Maybe stand around it until they take it down. They don't have to vandalize it, like burn them. I mean, it's illegal. I mean, they're rioting. It's not protesting. I just feel like
if the government did right, like for instance, let me just try and draw one analogy before we're like forced to a close here. If there were in the aftermath, right, of a major conflict, let's say World War II, right, Nazi statues in Jewish neighborhoods, right, statues of Nazi leadership. If those people illegally, albeit, tore them down, but the government did nothing about it and just allowed them to tear it down, would you disagree with that?
Would I disagree? I mean, I don't know. I'm not personally. I know that they left the train tracks on a specific Jewish in a specific place in Germany.
I'm not asking about what about something else. I'm asking, would you support them tearing it down, right? Nazi statues, even if it were done extra democratically, would you support Nazi statues being taken down in Jewish neighborhoods? Specifically in the aftermath of World War II, right? Done by the people without the consent of the people.
Right after, you mean? Yeah, right after, absolutely. I mean, it just happened. I'm talking about these statues.
And racism and the subjugation of African Americans, right, is still happening now. So having statues of those leaders being venerated.
There's no racism now. It's not happening.
Slavery and subjugation of African Americans is happening now.
I cannot wait to talk about this on the next podcast.
We've demonstrated how it's happening.
We've got to wrap it up. Don't worry. If you still have something to say, you still got time to say it. We're going to go around and finish these statements. You all get a minute. So if you have anything left to say, and you can counter other people's statements. If you think somebody said something weird at the end, you can.
Racism is dead, boys. We did it.
Yay.
That's an amazing achievement. You heard it here first. We ended it on the Hippy Dippy podcast. You won't find that on Big Brain. Okay, Tiberius.
You won't find Big Brain at all.
Yeah, Big Brain is brain dead. Tiberius.
I appreciate it. I was wanting to get a bit of a rebuttal in there, so this is mainly going to be a demon moment. I'm sorry. Okay, so Indiana here, just my situation that I was going with is that, if you want to say that my personal influence here or that my knowledge base is ignorant, that I'm not involved. I mean, I talk to the black community here. Not a lot of them. It's 90% white here, but they're still dumb, and they're still there, and they don't really make this as an issue. Sorry. So now, if you want to say that I'm ignorant and my opinion's garbage, and you just want to ignore it, go for it. I would say that if you want to make this a national conversation, you completely can't do that. But do you really want to bring in a state that's 90% white? That might actually make it worse. So my whole thing is here. If it's my choice, tear them down. But this is your guys' issue for the South. This should be up to you. Thank you.
I'm also going to say that I think next time, I've been trying to be really good on this. I'm going to make sure next time that we have an issue that has to do with the Confederacy, that we have somebody on the panel that is black. I'm going to be really careful to do that next time, because there was a lot of discussion about that. It felt really weird there not being a black person on the panel to do that. I'm going to work hard to do that. I was sure to do it with the Black Lives Matter. I should have done that for this.
I have someone for you. That he's actually on my channel. He served 25 years in prison. He streams with me all the time, and he's African American. And
I'm always lovely to have more people come on the show of any political beliefs, as long as they're not going to come on to do something TOS. Okay, Republican Nation, you're next.
All right. Well, I just wanted to say, I feel that the statues represent a portion of our history, whether it be good or bad. It is history. You can't erase it. It's there. The fact that these statues, I didn't laugh when you make your comments, and you make comments all the time that are laughable. So that being said, if it does offend a certain group of people and people want them down because it offends their history or whatever, I agree with the fact of relocating them. Now, doing it in a violent way, I disagree completely. I think it kills the cause and it makes people get angrier seeing people tearing down things that don't belong to them. It's not their property, and it's terror. Like, that's what you're doing. You're using violence to scare people and threaten people that you're going to take down more statues with violence, and it doesn't solve anything. I mean, all you can do is try to get it through the legislation, go through due process, have the statues removed. I'm sure a lot of people out there agree with the fact that some statues can be very offensive to certain people, but relocate them to a place where people can at least see them if they want to, like, know a little bit about our history and see how some of these people looked in the time period, or observe the monuments, whatever the case may be. But we don't have to tear them down. We don't have to use violence. There's a way of doing this without having to riot and cause havoc.
Okay, next is going to be Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting discussion. This isn't necessarily a big issue for me, but I kind of agree with the idea that if people vote to have these taken out, I don't have a problem with that. Just a couple things to wrap up. I thought that it was interesting that we kind of seem to get to a point where I think it's objectively true that more people care about this issue now than they did, years ago, like even 3-4 years ago, even 6 months ago. So it seems almost like the idea that this was instilling fear in the black community just isn't true. Most people just didn't care. And so, as most things, the more we focus on the racial aspects of it, the more it ends up causing racial division. And so I also think that even though I feel it was unfortunate that we avoided the argument of how the exact same arguments we see being made here as to why to tear down Confederate statues are being used to deface abolitionists, or being used to tear down statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. That's the problem. Once we say, well, something's hate speech and people are justifiably angry, therefore they could extra democratically go out and take things down themselves, people say, yes, and I have an issue also. I would like to remove this statue. And it's going to lead to a sort of cancel culture where we see all sorts of figures from the past, many of which were noble, such as, I believe the gentleman's name was Haig, a Swedish man who was an abolitionist who had his statue taken down. We're going to see this happen over and over and over, and all it will do is continue to cause racial division and division amongst working class people, that if instead of having this, by the way, remember, the establishment is all for this. Why? Because they know that if working class people of all colors would start to look at the establishment and see how they've screwed over working class people in this country for 60 years, that they would start to get those people out. Instead, we're fighting with each other over statues.
Okay, next we're going to throw it over to Demon Mama.
Yeah, statues are mythologized. They're symbolic. You don't see realistic portrayals of Robert E. Lee from the battlefield with his sweat stains and ripped shirts and stuff. They are meant to make a statement. And we have to analyze what that statement is and how they're being wielded. I think that a lot of these Confederate statues have been wielded intentionally to harm minority communities. And I think that if you were to ask many members of those communities, they would feel very similar to that. And even if they didn't, we can still acknowledge that these statues were designed with a particular political angle. As a result, I think that it's perfectly justified to take them down. Of course, I would prefer to have them done in any democratic method, if that's possible. But I think that it is incredibly blind and somewhat self-centered to believe that just because something can't be done via standard democratic process, for example, statues being installed via undemocratic process, that it is therefore wrong that they're taken down when a voice may have been completely suppressed, or the voice of a community might have been completely suppressed. So yeah, I do support these taken down statues being taken down, and I do support the renaming of military bases, etc., that are named after slavers, of course.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Ankar.
I think most of what I wanted to say has pretty much been said by the other people on the panel. I don't like the way that it happens. I think that it's a bad message to send, that if you get enough violent people to tear something down, then it's okay. If it's an abhorrent thing and people feel really strongly about it, and et cetera, it's a bad precedent to set. If you can rally enough people to just go burn and tear stuff up, they were obviously upset enough to do it, so it's okay. With the statues, I'm pretty much on the same camp as everybody else. If it was done democratically, if it upsets people enough, then they could go and raise awareness of it. And I'm sure that America is not so damn spiteful and hateful that they would refuse to get rid of a statue that just completely, upset a significant portion of a locality. But with regards to the military bases, I have no movement on that. Like, under no circumstance would I ever support renaming any military base at this point.
Okay, next we're gonna throw it over to Supreme. Oh, that's an amazing take. I love this take. This is a great take.
Supreme.
Okay, so I made my case pretty early on that the Confederacy explicitly stated that the reason for seceding was to further perpetuate the institutions of slavery, that they believed that the black man or the black African or the African man was naturally inferior to the white man, and that their natural place was in subservience to the white man. I think it's kind of strange that so many people are focusing on the ethics of how they are taken down, but have no questions about the ethics of how they were erected in the first place. I would say that any statue of a person whose legacy was in perpetuating the institutions of slavery erected in a public space, especially by private funds, is naturally unethical. If it's in a public space, then it's a public symbol of hatred and racial supremacy. I'm far less concerned with how they are removed than how they were erected. And if they were not erected justly, then their removal is just, no matter by any means. I don't care. We can build another statue anywhere. Like, their value as how they were erected and when they were erected is not important at all to me. I really don't care. Furthermore, I think statues are fucking weird. Like, if I do great things in my life, I hope that I'm not commemorated by people like gathering around my body and taking a look at my weird ass and shit. That's weird. It's just a body I live in. Like, this is not the body that I live in is not a statement of everything that I stand for. It's a statement of like everything I ever did in this body, including every piss I ever took. Don't worship my body. That's fucking weird. If I do great things, or if one of you do great things, God willing, inshallah, then fucking write a book, put it on a plaque, spread the ideas that you think are good to spread, and hope that people can be submitted to them through some sort of like public order. Anyway.
Okay. Next is North.
I think Supreme is based as fuck. I think the left is based as fuck here. I think we have a clear fucking idea, right, of that this is, morally corrupt to keep these statues up. I think that there's demonstrable harm done by, leaving them up. I think that they are hate speech. I think that they're designed, right, and the design of them is important to consider, right? Why were these statues erected in the first place? Supreme put it really, really well, and I'm going to reiterate that, right? They were put up to scare black people, right? And we live in a society in which black people are still scared in a lot of ways to exist, or so I am told, right? I obviously can't speak for people of color, but right, given that that's the case, right, I think we should all endeavor to work for a society in which, right, like they people of color don't feel that way. And I think part of it is not enshrining monuments to people who specifically treated them as chattel.
Okay, and finally, Vivian.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, was it Republican National? I don't know. I wasn't looking at the fucking screen. He made the comment about me like laughing when he made his final statement. And I just the reason I laugh is because we made a couple of points right at the beginning of this that were then in response to their arguments, which pretty definitively like disprove some of their arguments. Specifically the one that Republican National referred to as like you can't erase history, and this was addressed like much earlier, right? Like we covered that. I feel like we covered that, and I feel like everybody agreed that removing statues doesn't and is not intended to erase history. And yet he still brought it up in his closing fucking statement. Somebody else brought up like, oh, if you can just get a big enough mob together in order to then it's perfectly okay to like remove these statues. That's just a rephrasing of like the might makes right thing, right? Like if you have enough power, then it's perfectly fine for you to do it. Nobody's making that fucking argument. We stated that earlier in the conversation as well. So what this demonstrates to me is that the people that we're engaging with here don't have any interest in fucking engaging honestly with the conversations that are being put forth here. This is why I generally think that debating these people and platforming them is largely irresponsible, because they're not interested in having honest debate. They're not interested in taking in information that is given to them. All they want to do is sit here, spout the same fucking lines that they spout like or have heard on fucking Fox TV or fucking posted on social media media, right? Like, there's no back and forth here. There's no actual engagement. And I hope that the people watching kind of notice that we are addressing the fucking points that they are making. We are refuting and rebutting the points that they are making, and they are just repeating them ad nauseum.
Okay, and
I'm
we're
not going to
going
leave them
to
and say
wrap
that I'm not arguing in good faith. I think I've been very polite, and I thought we had a very good discussion. So I'm
Tiberius, Tiberius, I'm not really including you, buddy.
Everybody,
The
Generally
rules.
okay.
The rules.
Please, Rob. I understand. I can definitely feel why you feel pointed. You have an opening statement in the next thing, and you can start your opening statement by countering it. That's why we have the opening and ending statements. You've been really good with the rules, and I always appreciate you following the rules, even when others don't. So I really appreciate that. Okay, next we're going to go to the next topic, which is going to be about immigration, another totally bipartisan issue. So the question is, should the children of undocumented immigrants be granted legal citizenship? There has been a question about specifics of, does that mean somebody coming over with children or those children being born while they are here? You may discuss both, but it was more, my original framing was more about the idea of somebody having a kid while they are currently in the country, but you can also talk about the other situation as well if you want to go to through a humanitarian angle or anything else. So that is the question. I will repeat it one more time. Should children of undocumented immigrants be granted legal citizenship? I will start this off from the top down with Tiberius.
I appreciate that. Okay, out of hand, I'm just going to say I'm okay with this. Two reasons why. Number one, this is a constitutional amendment. This was actually birthright citizenship covered in the 14th Amendment. This, as far as I'm concerned, constitutionally by law is a solved issue. And so whether you like it or not, I mean, it's here to stay. Now, if you want to go down the road of repealing it, I mean, you could do that, but holy crap. I mean, you're looking at a full constitutional process to do that. I've got things I'd rather have, like an actual an amendment on finally getting abortion, or I'm not saying which states I'm on, or what's the difference between a right and a privilege. That is something I want a constitutional amendment on. This is already in the books. On the other hand, I want to say that this is the trailing end argument of immigration. I would rather have the conversation on, what happens when people get here, when they are legal, like what's the legal ramifications to become a citizen? Like what criteria do we want to set? Because that's not set in stone at all. And then if they come here illegally, what is the proper repercussions or discourse for that? I think those are where we actually need to take the discussions, but that's my point. Next, please.
Okay, next is going to be Republican Nation.
My view on this, if they're born in the United States, they're American. I mean, it's in the Constitution. I agree completely with Tiberius on this matter. And that's pretty much my view on that. If they cross the border, I'm iffy about it. For humanitarian reasons, I mean, my parents came here seeking political asylum, so I can understand the reason why people want to come to this country, and I can understand that they struggle to get here, and I can understand those views. So it's kind of like I don't know, it's a sensitive subject for me. So, but that being said, if they're born in this country, they're American.
Okay, I want to say we did a poll beforehand, and the overwhelming majority is yes. We will also do a poll afterwards to see if anybody's changed some minds. Next, we're going to throw it over to Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, just real quick, the point I was making. Vivian, I tried to treat you with respect. I'm sorry if you feel that I was arguing in bad faith. I wasn't. I thought that, for example, that you, North Mage and Supreme and Demon all made points that I thought were worthwhile. So just to get that out of the way. I kind of agree with Tiberius on this. It's settled. Now, do I think that they should we work on passing an amendment? It's almost a moot point because there certainly wouldn't be an amendment that would pass that would override the 14th. But let's say hypothetically, I'm torn on this. I guess that definitely I would not want to see these children be deported. Do they get full citizenship without maybe having to do something like, for example, some sort of small community service, military service? That could be an issue worth debate. I haven't really thought about it that hard, but I certainly would be opposed to whether it be DACA people or people that were just in the situation we're talking about with birthright citizenship being deported. And certainly anyone who is born here now, when the law is the way it is, they should never have that taken away from them. They're absolutely American citizens, and that shouldn't even be a question. Now, having said that, I agree with Tiberius also that I think the question becomes, what about the people that came illegally in the first place and broke the law? And I think that we see problems with things like chain migration as well, where we say, oh, well, now that you were born here and you're a citizen, now we'll leave your parents stay. I would like to see some sort of punishment to dissuade illegal immigrants for trying to come over. But ultimately, my feelings on illegal immigration is the way you really solve it is to go after the corrupt business owners that are intentionally hiring illegals and paying them sham wages. And as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans are liars when they say they want to end illegal immigration, because they never want to go after the wealthy businesses that are the reasons that illegals are coming here. So I guess that's my complicated thought on it.
Okay, next is going to be Ankar.
I guess first I want to respond to what was said by Vivian at the end as well. It doesn't matter if your theory or your idea or concept of what's going on is not that mob violence is validated and it's not might makes right, because that's the real application that we are seeing, is that violence is effective and might makes right. And if you want to, if that's the situation, then I'm fine with that. Like, we can actually go forward within that framework. Like, I'm okay. But I just think that it needs to be universally accepted that is the understanding that we're going to have going forward. With regard to the current question, I'm kind of disappointed that only Tiberius brought this up, and he didn't really nail it down in the way that I would like for him to. And that's that this question it's a framing device. You find it in Influence and Persuasion. It's called Thinking Past the Sale. And that's that illegal aliens are a given. So what do we do with their children? And I don't think that that's an acceptable framing of anything that has to do with immigration. I think immigration always needs to start with immigration and not, well, what do we do once, we allow unfettered immigration? Birthright citizenship is a thing. If you want to end it, I'm willing to have that conversation, both for legacy Americans as well as immigrants. I think that that's actually a valid conversation to have at this point, because we've kind of hit a new stage in America. So if people are wanting to have that conversation, whether or not another avenue to citizenship could work, as opposed to birthright, sure. But like everybody else, it's pretty settled. It's a constitutional amendment. It's birthright citizenship. But I'm not going to think past the sale and allow the framing to just accept that illegal aliens are a given.
Okay, next we're going to throw it over. By the way, you said legacy Americans. I've never heard that term before. Could you explain what that is quick?
I made it up on the fly. It means essentially, the people in this chat, we're Americans. Our parents were Americans. So like generational Americans, I guess, might be a more apt term. But essentially, it was just a way to label generational Americans when talking about the potential to have a real conversation with regards to birthright citizenship.
Okay. Next is Demon Mama.
Yeah. This is a settled issue in my mind. At least the core question is. But I also I want to make note that we are by far the most wealthiest country on the planet. We have an incredible amount of resources and power. I can see no justifiable reason why we should ever be considering deporting children. I don't even understand why we need to consider barbaric deportation processes. We have so many other options available to us, and yet so frequently it seems that people just almost reflexively go towards the worst options imaginable, the most violent, the most vile versions imaginable. And to me, I think that's worthy of challenging. I think we should challenge the idea that deporting children, jailing children, regardless of their paperwork status, should ever be something that comes onto comes into our discourse. I think it's repugnant, and I think that we should move past that as quickly as possible.
Okay, next is going to be Vivian.
Oh fuck. I was still thinking a lot about the other shit, but I
can go to you last if you want.
I'm not going to carry that conversation on. In regards to the DACA and should the kids of immigrants be automatically citizens? Is that essentially the question? Yeah.
Yeah, or you can take it whatever direction you want. It might just slide into a general topic about immigration. That could happen.
Yeah, sure. Come back to me if you can. Thanks.
Problem. We can start with Supreme then.
Sure. Just as was mentioned earlier, this is already a soft case constitutionally. I guess I'm sure we probably all agree that a person born here in the United States should be considered a U.S. citizen. But I guess I'll make a statement about where I predict the conversation going next, which is what about a child who has already been born and is being carried over the border? What should we do with that person? I think we need to design a very specific set of like hypotheticals to answer that question. For example, if the child is still a child and the parents are apprehended by ICE, for example, and scheduled to be deported, I think it's important for the parents to be able to make the decision whether the child stays with them or stays in U.S. custody. And if, I guess like if the parents, if the child becomes separated from the parents, but they still find themselves within our borders, I think that they should be granted citizenship automatically, or a path to citizenship should be granted to them, because we recognize that parents have autonomy over children. Therefore, children have no agency in the decision to have entered the country legally or illegally. It doesn't matter. Children can't be illegal. I don't believe that people can be illegal. In general, I think we've recognized, most economists agree that immigration in general, illegal or legal or otherwise, is a boon to our economy. There is a lower rate of crime among immigrant populations in the United States. There doesn't seem to be any great detriment to accepting more immigration. There only seems to be benefit to us economically, socially, so on and so forth. So I just don't see any good reason to deny anybody citizenship to the United States. And it seems to be largely beneficial. And from a child's perspective, I don't since we recognize that children don't have the agency to commit, federal crimes, then yes, we should absolutely allow them citizenship into this country if the decision was made through their parents' autonomy.
It's gonna be North and Viv. I gotta use the bathroom quick. I'll be right back.
He's leaving. He's leaving when I need to draw attention to a grave injustice that has been done on this panel, and that's the muting of my words, because Dylan keeps putting me last because he's afraid of the magic of my rhetoric.
I'm lost.
Anyway. Mask off. Anyway, true. But I think whether or not immigrants come for these businesses, I think Rob was describing this, right? That immigrants are coming because of businesses that are, like exploiting them and that'll, right, essentially pay them under the table. I don't think that immigrants come for that kind of thing. I think they come, right? They obviously come to get jobs, but I think to specifically say that they come for those things, and that's the reason why Republicans want them, is because it's making so much money to have, right, like immigration be illegal and keeping them under the table. I think the reason why, right, like this citizenship is contested for these people is because there's a voting base that the Republicans don't want in the form of these immigrants, in the form of these naturalized, right, citizens, be it DACA recipients, right, et cetera. That's why you see the Republican Party, right, revamping efforts of deportation for these individuals, because they vote in local elections, right? They influence politics in a real way, right? So realistically, I think that immigration is far too restricted in this country in the first place, and I anticipate this is where the conversations go, because it is a solved issue, right? It's not right, like whether or not the children of naturalized citizens should be people who are born here, whether or not they're naturalized citizens, it's solved, right? But whether or not people who come over into our country and who are subject to our laws, right, whether or not they should be able to vote, of course they should be able to vote. They're subject to our laws. They should have some say.
Okay, next we're gonna throw it over to Viv.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Supreme made a lot of the points that I would generally make, which is that immigrants, by and large, are like a boon to our economy. They commit less crime than even American, already naturalized people, right? Illegal immigrants, even.
They're less of a drain on social programs.
Less of a drain on social programs, all that sort of shit. And, if we go with, I'm not normally one to champion the Cato Institute, but perhaps that'll be be convincing to some right-wingers there. There's a pretty good reason why sort of right-wing libertarians, if they're true to their ideology and they're not just, fash pretending to be libertarians, they generally are pro-immigration, because it is just fucking better for everybody. So I don't see any reason like why you wouldn't want to naturalize the children of immigrants. Like, I suppose that's the question I'd want to put to the opponents of this. Is just like, yeah, why would you not want to?
Because I
can't see
don't want
any-
unskilled labor flooding our country.
Wait. Okay. Everybody's finished. Now you can open it up. And Car, obviously, you want to say something. Throw it over to him.
I mean, I said that I don't want unskilled labor that does not have, does not share culture and language coming into the country. You know, I'm not going to pull it up, but there are sources and economists that say that, you know, immigration is not always beneficial to the host country, and wanting to turn. I can't believe that I actually heard an argument from two people to turn America into the de facto global orphanage. Like that was just kind of a real shock to me, that it's like all the children should be allowed to come to America. I expected most of the arguments that we heard, or almost the positions, but I really didn't expect that one.
Who made that argument?
Yeah, I don't remember anyone saying.
I think
anything
it was
about
Demon
factor
Mama and
global.
Supreme that even if people are brought over here, that the parents are deported, then the parents should have the authority to make the decision whether or not the children stay. That was Supreme's, and then Demon Mama was essentially a derivative of the same thing.
Oh, so that you drew that out to make some sort of absurd claim about a global orphanage or something?
I mean, if
do you
you're not
think
going
that
to turn away children, then it's a de facto orphanage.
do you believe that in a country where we have people who are like approaching $1 trillion in income, that we have like
No
you know,
one
the
in this
richest
country
people,
has
do you
$1
think that
trillion
any
in
do you think that
Approaching.
anybody
Approaching.
I said
Nobody in
very,
this
very
country.
clearly listen to words. I know it's very I know it's very hard.
You
for
don't
you.
understand the difference between income and wealth, do you?
Yes, I very strongly
Okay, so
understand.
what American has $1 trillion of
Did I
annual
say
income?
income? I'm
Yes, you
sorry
said-
if I
okay.
said income. I'm so sorry that
Okay.
I made a very minor misstep in word.
Well, words matter.
Regardless, the point is that we are one of the wealthiest and most powerful countries on the planet, and the idea that you would sit here and say that we should deport children, to me, just seems incredibly barbaric. And yeah, that's a bit of a moral judgment, but I mean, I think a lot of people would agree with that. I mean, do we really think that children should be forced through what we know is a brutal deportation process? I simply say no. I don't think it's realistic to like imagine that like changing our policy or building a policy that says, hey, we can facilitate children in need whose parents brought them here against, you know, with no say of their own, that we can facilitate giving them a fair life.
We can't handle the children. We can't handle American children.
Let's
we
let
have
Demon Mama
orphanage.
finish.
I know it's very hard. It seems to me very, very absurd that the answer to that would be to thrust those children out of the country by force, instead of just saying, hey, we actually have the ability to do this. Also, I don't think it's realistic or reasonable to try and say that would suddenly turn us into the orphanage of the world, seeing as how it actually costs money to get here often, and people go through great risk to get here in the first place. I don't think that there is any evidence that you could produce right now, but if so, I would love to see it, but that you could produce that would indicate that all of a sudden every child in danger in the world would suddenly appear in the United States.
I'd like to actually jump in on this one. Okay, so
Hang on.
I've got
No, I'm
two
just kidding.
sides.
Hey,
Damn it.
Tiberius, let me answer, since she directed that at me first. I think that the solution, the easy solution, is to simply not allow the children into the country in the first place, and that way you don't have to violently deport them. But if they are here, I think
So just have like
illegal
a big
aliens
bug
in the
zapper,
country-
like instead of a wall, just
No,
like a big.
I think you put the wall up, and then you put automated machine guns on it, and you just shoot everybody approaching the wall. After so many years or whatever, people will stop approaching the wall.
Why is that necessary?
Yeah, or
Like, what do
so
you?
let's fucking murder
He was
random
being-
people.
he was being sarcastic.
They're not
Like,
random.
Wait,
They're not
are you
random
being
people.
sarcastic here, or is this like a
Yeah,
legitimate point that you
hyperbole.
believe?
No, he's fucking serious.
Are you?
Question.
I
Robin,
can't tell. I honestly can't. I didn't hear it.
Do you guys all sign off on that? Does the right side all sign off that we
I
should have
said it was
machine gun
North.
emplacements that should shoot
Hold
children?
on. Let me answer, North. It was hyperbole, and I'd like to let Tiberius go.
There's a fundamental thing that I would like to ask you before
Just-
that.
I
I'm
just-
sorry
do you
for
wanna-
cutting
do
it.
you wanna
Right? Do you
say
believe
something?
that children should be shot?
I gotta stop this here. I don't know if that's TOS or not, and I'm gonna be I honestly don't.
discussing the shootings at the Israeli wall, Israeli walls, like with the like settlements, is not TOS.
Okay,
discussing,
okay.
I
I guess.
It's,
Yeah.
it's definitely
theory, it
TOS
would
to be
go-
fucking advocating for murdering children.
I
Yeah.
think in theory it would go to protecting sovereignty, and I don't
So
see
sovereignty
why
is
that
more.
would be
So to be
TOS.
clear, sovereignty of the U.S. Right, despite the economic benefit that immigrants have, other than in some small
I
cases.
don't accept
right,
that there's economic benefit to
Vivian,
vast unskilled labor.
Can you produce the
Wait.
sources you
I
have?
can produce something that says contrary.
That says
so
that,
it's-
it'll say contrary. What it'll say is I'm familiar with that literature. What that literature will say is please is that in small, right, like in localized cases, right, over a small period of time, right, it can negatively impact the economy because it can take like they're taking more gerbs. It can take some unskilled labor positions, right, and it will displace Americans because some illegal immigrants are willing to work for lower wages,
not that it
right?
can,
Like
but
that
that
is
it
true.
does.
No, and it does do that, but in the long term, right? And if these citizens are actually included into society in a real way where they're not forced to work for like lesser wages, right? Like that doesn't actually negatively impact the economy. Plus, the economy is moving in a way where we will need a large amount of unskilled labor in the next like 10 to 15 years. The economy is developing in that way.
Can we?
So,
Let's hear Tiberius. I felt bad for him last time. He
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate it.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay.
I needed
Disclaimer.
to get that out there.
Disclaimer: I'm currently studying in economics and political science, so you can take this with as much grain of salt as you want to. Economically, immigration does have impacts. They are both positive and negative. The positives is that it is a young labor force that tends to be able to move up the value added chain. So they usually have like a low income at first, and then they actively get higher or go higher as they age. The other one is that by just sheer scale, you have more people, you have a bigger economy. It tends to gear the economic grease, if you will. The negative is that it just innately does push down the cost of labor, and that's for everyone. And unfortunately, with most immigration, because H-1B is not consistent, is that it does hit the lowest or the low skill labor hardest, and that can hurt a lot because we do have some low income disadvantaged people here that actually hurts more. So I'm not going to say this is just a straight up net gain. Political science, I want to hit and just saying that it does make for cultural diversity. There's a positive and a negative to this. It's positive in that people are less easy to control because they have different ethics and values and norms that you have to conform to actually get them to go a certain way. So it's easier to break that up, and that's sometimes a really good thing. The negative is that when people see people that are different and talk different, or all that, the xenophobia does tend to get cranked up, and I do think we're seeing that now with the rise of Trump. That's all I got.
Well, I think that you have an issue with never mind. I'll let someone else go.
Sure, there's nothing objectively wrong by inducting a group of people that speak a different language and practice a different culture. It doesn't matter what country you live in. If you're I don't care if you're my next door neighbor. If you live halfway around the world, speak whatever language you want. Eat whatever food you want. Listen to whatever music you want. It has no impact on me. If there's some greater negative social impact, it's as a direct result of people being uneducated and people being naturally fearful of things that are different. This doesn't need to necessarily be so. This doesn't have to be something intrinsic in human behavior. If it's true for me, it can be true for anybody. I don't see that there's any great detriment to people coming in that by and large speak a different language than me, or listen to different music, or eat different food, or like have dances or whatever that are different from my dances. I actually
ask you something.
Go ahead.
So you're saying people that speak another language, does that mean exclusively speak another language and do not speak English?
Sure.
Do you think what have you that the educational cost of a child that does not speak English is different than a native English speaking child?
The cost, if there's we can afford
It's not
ESL
a
training.
complex
It doesn't matter if
matter.
if it costs more. The point is we can afford it. And again, I don't know. We are okay with people privately setting up foreign language schools for children as well.
Right,
it
but
doesn't.
Those are native English speaking children learning another language. Or are you talking about like a strictly ESL school?
Well, sure. Sure. I'm talking about native English speaking children learning another language, but
right.
I don't think the cost is substantial to have people who come here who speak like a foreign language natively who enter the school system. I mean, it's children learn language at rapid fire. I don't see it as being
learn the language very quickly when they are speaking it at home. But whenever they are only speaking English in a limited duration for a very small period, like if you're
it's
in school,
irrelevant. I actually don't care. I don't care how long it takes them.
Schools are clamoring for funding nonstop, and you're looking at something that
we should pay them more.
Right, but this drastically increased the cost.
Yeah, we can afford the cost. I would rather
the idea that it drastically increases the cost to have immigrant children is ridiculous.
I wish we could agree to pay that cost. Hold on, I wish we could agree to pay that cost instead of like be complicit and just like instead choose to allow people to live a lifestyle that allows them to purchase multiple helicopters, like a fleet of personal aircraft and helicopters, and then consistently cut their taxes over and over again. Yeah, I mean, I don't care if it costs more. That's a cost worth paying, I think. And it's, again, it'll be a boon to our economy in the long run. It's an investment.
If I may, I think on this point, there's a lot to say on this topic, but Supreme, on this point, I have to disagree with you somewhat because I don't know that you're exactly saying this, so forgive me if I'm misrepresenting you, but I do think that there has to be something cohesive about what makes us a country. So we can't just say anyone can speak any language or have any culture. For example, there are cultures around the world that place women on far lower legally status, what they're allowed to do, than the United States. Would it be okay if they bring that culture here and say, well, in our culture, for example, we have our own private courts, and if a woman cheats on her husband,
it's why we have legal protections for people. It's why we have protected classes. It doesn't matter what culture you hail from or what language you speak or what food you eat. If you come to the United States, it's illegal to disparage against women based on their statuses on their gender or whatever. Or race,
so we could clearly say there's some things culturally that I was just getting that out there. So I agree with you that like legally we have our protections. It shouldn't matter if your culture where you came from disagreed. But even with the language, I do think that there's something fundamental. Being able to, I think one of the problems we're seeing in the country today, which I think Dylan's doing a great job of showing why this is good, is we're not talking to each other enough, even when we know the same language. And so I do think that there are certain milestones, like culturally, like we need to have something that we could say, this is what makes us American. This is how we all associate, because we agree that there are great things about diversity.
The language our government, the language our government operates on is English. I don't see that changing. Like I'm not advocating that we change that.
Well, right, but I think immigrants would not only achieve better in this country, but also should make a good faith action to try to speak the language of that government. And I think that helps.
If they want to, put it up to them. Obviously, it benefits them economically to learn English. Probably. And like, if that's what they care to do, then that's fine. It's on them. It's
also more English speakers also benefit from learning other languages. Like language learning has a knock-on effect. The more languages you know, the greater your grasp of each language becomes. So learning other languages and teaching other languages and providing resources in other languages is an incredibly low-cost process by comparison to others, and it gives us huge benefit. Can you imagine if it became normal for Americans to speak multiple languages? How valuable that would be? How incredible that would be culturally?
I want to throw this over to Tiberius because he's been wanting to talk.
Oh, I appreciate that. There was one thing I just wanted to hit on Supreme with his rebuttal to me, in that I'm just going to quote you, and if I get it right, is that, hey, this works for me. You know, I can accept people of other cultures, whatever. I'm fine with that. I praise you for that, but you have to remember that might be a survivorship bias. Is that what works for you doesn't always work for other people. And dare I say that I may have lost my faith in humanity, but 99% of human history is hating of the other people. So whatever the other happens to be, I don't think we're past that yet.
Well, then we have our work cut out for us. Right.
Yeah, we definitely do. And so my real thing here is that we have to be careful, because we might be playing with fire. We might enrage the people that are going to be culturally xenophobic to the point where they will become even more politically active. So,
that is a danger, but that's why I say, like, you know, I wouldn't call fighting to educate people away from racism survivorship bias. I would just call that like our moral imperative, right, in this country. And it's the same with xenophobia. I understand that you're identifying that a large influx of an ethnic group may result in a sort of pendulous, reciprocation and or capitulation, I should say. Sorry, of like xenophobia or whatever. But then we just have our work cut out for us. That's why it's our job, each and every one of us, to try and educate people as to why diversity in culture and language and stuff like that are actually enriching experiences that make us better as a nation, stronger as a nation, so on and so forth.
But let me say,
I don't think a culturally divided nation is stronger.
Yeah, we
I-
should be culturally. No, we should be culturally and
Yeah.
ethnically.
I think
Well,
a
I mean-
culturally diverse nation is stronger.
Culturally
yeah,
divided.
there's
We
a
should- we
difference
should
between.
all
The
be a
issue
monolith.
is
We
with
should
the
be-
volume
everyone
of
should be white.
immigration. You end
There's
up
a-
with cultural
Dylan,
enclaves,
when
and
you
it
get a
becomes
chance, let me
culturally
talk.
divided.
Cultural enclaves.
North-
They're
No,
oh,
North, I
okay.
understand your support for the one wizard state, but we're not gonna have it. Okay, we're not gonna advocate for that on this stream. Okay, continue.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being like culturally divided and culturally diverse, right? Like I don't feel culturally divided from like the Bangladeshi dudes who like run the shop down the road from me. I don't feel fucking culturally divided from the Caribbean folk who live down the road from me. Like I recognize that they have different sort of like practices, and they have different things that they enjoy and that they've brought over from a different place, right? But we can still take part in like communal activities. We can still like be together
Do they feel
and enjoy each other's company and enjoy each other's cultures
Do you not
as well.
recognize that you and I are culturally divided?
Oh yeah, we are very culturally divided because you. I don't even. Do you know what we?
Well, you hail from
understand.
you hail from
I-
different countries, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
we are.
That should be obvious.
We are
about
from
that
very
based on the
different
accent,
countries.
like why?
Can I make
or
one comment?
whatever. I won't.
I'm
I
saying
won't touch on
saying that cultural diversity doesn't
It's-
necessarily mean cultural division. That's my point.
it's
Right?
irrelevant.
You choose
right?
to be culturally divided.
It
Like I don't
depends on the
feel
Hold on.
culturally divided from Vivian, and we share like we share the difference of country, right? But like I feel culturally very similar to Vivian, right? Like I feel culturally in tune, and I feel like I would feel that way with like with the Caribbean, people that like mentioned, and with largely most immigrants. And I think the reason why immigration is so opposed by this cultural divide that you're pointing out, it's between the left and the right, and it's because the right doesn't want people
Right.
who are on the left, right, to join this country because they don't want the voting to swing in a direction that's against them.
real
Right.
quick? Do they
Can
feel
I-
divided from you?
The inverse of that
Ankar,
argument can
please,
be made.
just for a second.
I-
Do
I've
they
been
feel divided
trying to get one in for like an hour.
from Republic?
No, go. You first.
Do they
Go,
feel
go.
divided
That's
from
fine.
you, Vivian and Northmead? Like, for example, you might say, "Hey, I'm cool with the people in Chinatown. I'm cool with it," but do they feel isolated from you? I think there is. We can
Well, I
say
mean,
there are
there's always going to
ghettoization.
be.
I don't think they would be aware of it if that was the
Well,
case.
but
It depends what you mean by division, right? Like, there are always going to be things that I will never be able to understand about their experiences because I'm not them, right? But that's the same is true for absolutely, for all people. You pointed out earlier that you and I are like culturally divided, and yet we come from culturally very similar backgrounds.
Yeah,
And that's the point, right? Like,
That is
I
the
don't-
point. And if you look at immigration and the cyclical history of immigration, we have been at a peak for a long period of
I
time.
think-
and
I
I think that
think
it is in
we'd
the
be
best
much
interest
less
of the
culturally-
country to lower the amount of immigration
think
and
we'd be
allow
much
for
We
less
the
shouldn't have had the
culturally
Irish
divided.
or the Italians or
That's
any
a
of
perfect
the
example.
people
Right.
who
No,
found
okay,
this
okay.
country
This
and
is a perfect
everybody
example.
was
Everybody's
labor
talking.
was the
Everybody's
backbone.
This is what it is. that I'm
Everybody's
saying.
talking.
Can I
Everybody's talking
just
at once.
say one
Everybody's talking
thing
as
and
one.
then I'm
Everybody's talking as
out
one.
'cause I
Everybody's
feel
talking as
ill
one. Everybody's talking as one. Okay,
I don't-
I'm gonna throw it to Viv, then I'm gonna throw it to Republican. Okay, go.
Cool. I feel ill anyway, so I'm gonna have to take my leave. But fuck. Whatever. I guess in closing, if you want to be less culturally divided, get rid of all the fucking Republicans because we have less in common with them than we do with most immigrants. Peace.
See you, Viv.
Have a good day.
No problem.
You feel better, Viv.
Missed.
Yeah, I hope you feel better. I also wanted to just address that, like,
Hold
I was
on,
talking.
Republican is up.
Wasn't I
Let
next?
Republican speak.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna give you. It's the Republican nation, but if you guys, it's Jace. My name is Jace. But, anyways, that being said, I'll give you a perfect example on how massive immigration can affect the city. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. Right? I speak Spanish and English. I speak both languages. Now, in Miami, my wife her mom is from Sweden and her dad's from Michigan, and she doesn't speak a word of Spanish. She can't get a job anywhere. She cannot get a job anywhere. She applied everywhere. She doesn't speak Spanish. She can't. And her biggest frustration was is that every time we would go to a McDonald's, Burger King, any drive-through, anywhere, they would actually ask you for your order in Spanish.
So what you're saying is an American cannot function in an American city.
Exactly.
because
my
they lack
God,
skills.
right.
Because they lack
Why are we
skills.
blaming?
Fuck off
No,
with
no, no,
that,
no,
They
no.
man. An
lack
American
skills.
should be able to function
Don't
in any
blame
American
Americans.
city.
Don't blame, because look, the people that I'm talking about are actually my people, like my family. It's majority of Miami's Cuban. I mean, it's Cuban and Venezuelan.
Hold on.
But that being,
What is the core gripe here? The complaint here is that a McDonald's that you went to.
no, not a McDonald's, not a McDonald's. Hey, I lived 33 years in Miami,
I think
and
you're
not a
minimizing
McDonald's.
experience, Dean.
You're
Mama.
No, I'm just asking.
you're twisting my words. I said my wife has gone with me to several fast food places, restaurants, and the first thing they do is talk to her in Spanish, and she doesn't understand a word they're saying.
It's majority Cuban in Miami, correct?
Absolutely, 100% Venezuelan.
Do most Cubans speak Spanish?
Most Cubans only speak Spanish.
Okay, so why wouldn't they? So why wouldn't they, practically speaking, why would that not cater to to the most amount of people possible, right, to make it easier for everyone? Because obviously it is no large crime to have to say, hey, actually, I speak English, not Spanish, right?
Like, who cares?
It's
They just asked
America.
you
I mean,
Spanish
why
first,
should
and
someone
you're offended by
So
that?
everything should be in English.
What a
Right? No,
snowflake.
if I go
Why
to
should we have to
Italy,
change our language? Why should we have to change?
It's
If
okay.
you go to Italy, you're not going to
go to an Italian part of an American city, and I go to an Italian restaurant run by Italian immigrants, and I go in and they address me in Italian first before they switch to English. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be so offended by that. I don't know if that happens. Probably doesn't happen.
I'm talking about
right? But
the
I'm not
majority
going to
of
be pissed off about it.
the majority of them don't speak a word of English, is what I'm saying.
Well,
And then my wife has less of a chance.
The data says that's not true. And listen, this is easier
I
to
don't care
address. Like,
what your data says.
well,
I'm talking about personal.
well, I care what the data says because I care about
You
reality.
care
And
now. You care now
well,
because you can prove it.
yes, of course
Prior
I
to
care
that-
now
prior
because
to
I
that,
live.
Rob,
This is where I'm
was
living in
saying
right now.
comment,
Okay,
and you guys
so
said the
it's
data
easy to
said that.
diffuse this anyway. Listen, it's easy to diffuse this anyway because the point is that ethnic enclaves. Nobody here is contesting that ethnic enclaves exist. Ethnic enclaves definitely exist when there's a large influx of immigration from a certain country or whatever. But if you look at, I mean, like historically, it seems to be very consistent that ethnic enclaves just diffuse over the period of one generation, right? It happened with Irish immigration, Italian immigration. I mean, people who immigrate from any certain place.
Chinatown been in San Francisco.
Chinatown has been in San Francisco since I think the 1800s or something, right? But
I mean,
what does it matter? The point is that
have not.
wait a minute? Have you been to Chinatown in San Francisco?
I have.
You enter any shop, they speak to you in English. So the point is, that's exactly my point, is that you give them a long enough period of time, usually over the course of one generation, the assimilation occurs. The populations, they have children, they learn, English in schools, and they have more mobility. It seems perfectly consistent that ethnic enclaves diffuse in such a way instead of consolidate, right?
I gotta stop. I'll throw right over the demon right after. But Mel just got in here, and I want to introduce Mel. And I gotta also say the trick or gerbs, and throw it over to Mel. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. My name is Melanie. And I'm a terrible, filthy communist, and I want to talk about immigration. I guess. I think I have a couple of things that I can add to the conversation about this. In regards to some of it's like anecdote Andy, and some of it's just like some facts and some logic. So if anyone wants me to open the floor, or I can just chime in whenever.
I'm really curious what Mel thinks, because
Nice to see you, Mel.
I was really looking forward to being on a panel with you eventually. And I'm
Well,
happy that I am.
yeah, all right. So I'm actually a naturalized citizen. So I basically have this really weird my view of immigration is when you're naturalized, you sort of have to the barriers for naturalization to become a citizen are really, really long. So unfortunately for me, I was adopted, so I only had 2 years essentially. So I didn't really have to go through the process. But my dad actually worked as an immigration officer for about 23 years, and so I've kind of observed things that he's done, and it's really, people don't realize how complicated this is. The only things that guarantee you citizenship in the United States is birthright and just having American parents, but every other process outside of that is horrendously complicated. There are so many vetting processes. There are so many things you have to do. The immigration tests are incredibly basic. They're not even based in the idea of, do you know how to be an American citizen? It's, where is your allegiance to American citizenry? So if you've ever taken any of the basic immigrant tests over the last 20 years, they're basically kind of like these weird pseudo like American memorization tests. Like, can you name presidents? Can you name the basic functions of the government, like what the judicial system does? They don't really actually test like what your qualifications are to being in this country going forward. That's actually more based in like the actual vetting process. So I guess like a lot of people when they talk about immigration, they don't want to like talk about the processes. They want to talk about like the emotional argument of like, well, these people are coming in and doing X, but we vent a lot of people and it's like really just based on where you come from. So like refugees and asylum seekers are treated as a completely different bracket than people that have a lot of money that just want to go to the United States to become citizens. That happens actually a lot. So like everyone's vetted on I don't want to say it's not cost, it's like a cost benefit, but like we vet people with different parameters based on what they are trying, what they're seeking, like depending on what your visa status is. So like a green card or like asylum seeking, like they're different requirements to basically becoming a citizen. But the testing and like the process of how to get there is like entirely the same. Because I think a lot of people think that it's just like this one catch-all uniform process, and it's not. I don't remember every single detail. I'd have to like pull up like like my dad's old like paperwork and shit. But
I love the fact that we vet people. We want to bring the best into the U.S. We don't want to just bring
Secondly, I want to talk about racial enclaves. So, for example, the reason why a lot of these racialized enclaves exist is not because they don't want to become like assimilated or they don't want to become Americans. It's a lot of it has to do with like capitalism and racism as well. Like people forget that Chinatown was like essentially a ghetto. What?
I think the reason that the culture.
Okay, can I? Okay. So people forget that Chinatown was essentially a ethnic enclave because they were kind of forced to be there. If people forget that, like when the Chinese miners were coming in to do the railroad work and to do the work in the mines, they were originally only men. So when the Chinese immigrants, they put out a call basically saying we want male Chinese workers. With women were not allowed, children were not allowed, and families were not allowed. This was because they didn't want to have a bunch of these Chinese people just moving in and just like having kids or something. I don't know. It was super racist. I can't remember the exact policy. And so once they started allowing like families in, they just sort of formed an ethnic enclave and they wanted to move out into other neighborhoods in San Francisco and sort of be a part of the American society. But there was this like, kind of like weird fear of like Chinese yellow peril that they were going to like, because they had opium dens. They were bringing in their own culture. And that culture that they established within San Francisco, within their ethnic enclave, was spoopy to a lot of the white people. A lot of the like sort of drug laws, like the war on drugs, actually starts with minority groups just hanging out and doing their own thing. And then other people get curious because, diversity or because I want to know what's going on. And sort of the primal fear of like brown people associating with white folks doing things that are scary. Like, I mean, like marijuana, opium, like the whole modern war on drugs was started like from the idea of like white women interacting with black men and like Asian men in opium dens and like
I think
Mexican
both
dudes.
originally Mexican, yeah.
Yeah, it's all of it. And so like a lot of that racism sort of like pushes these people like into these enclaves, and the racism sort of like isolates and they just kind of live there. It's the same thing like how like when we look at in France and other European countries, how like a lot of the like Muslim and Islamic folks live in these sort of like ghettoized areas. It's not because they don't want to be French or live outside of those places. It's because the culture and the climate has sort of pushed them there and won't let them actually try to assimilate. Because anytime they go outside that pre-existing culture, they're shunned immediately because of like white supremacy and things like that. I'm not saying this is a pure determining factor, but it is something to think about. How for example, like El Paso, Texas.
You've been going for a good amount of time.
Sorry.
There's a lot to respond there. Yeah, there's just a lot to respond. I want people to be able to respond to all your details. You can bring up other points as time goes on. Rob, you've been very eager to speak.
And thanks for coming on, Mel.
Demon Mama, I'm sorry. I did promise it to Demon Mama, then Rob. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't have all that much to say because Mel did touch on it pretty well. But I did want to say that in mentioning racial enclaves, there's an enormous lack of context that's being presented. Racial enclaves aren't like they're not like people want to be like, oh, we want to stay with our own. They're forced into it. Like in many cases, literally, like, I mean, we could talk about everything from Irish people to Chinese people in this country to black people in this country. All kinds of groups were forced into ethnic enclaves because I mean, like, you all have seen the fucking Irish need not apply sort of signs, right? Like, these things were forced. So as a result, an ethnic group has to make their own restaurants, their own businesses to take care of themselves in a nation that's ultimately hostile to them. And they can't really leave to go back to wherever they left to. I mean, that maybe they could, but maybe they don't want to. Maybe they want to make their life here now that they came all the way over here. So we should address those racial enclaves in their historical context, not just look at them and like, oh, look, they're making their own little racial enclave. That's not beneficial. Most of those people don't want to live in a racial enclave, but they're not allowed to not live in a racial enclave, sometimes literally by the law.
Okay. We're gonna throw it over to Rob.
Okay, so I got like 20 minutes of stuff to respond to there. First off, I think there's a lot of truth. Thank you for joining, Mel, and thanks for everyone so far. I think it's a great conversation. I think that, though, that we're missing half of the story, because although that's definitely true historically, no doubt, particularly when you're talking about blacks, Irish, Asians, all sorts of ethnic groups that certainly in the past of this country were legally forced into enclaves due to laws. I won't dispute that whatsoever, but a lot of those laws don't apply today. And there's also the truth that there are people within those groups that want to associate with other people in their groups and want their communities to look like them. For example, we hear about the problems of gentrification a lot of times in minority communities where they don't want people that don't look like them coming into their communities. Furthermore, there's other problems to discuss, like the enclave.
That's kind of misleading about gentrification, though. Like that is like
how much
misleading. Yeah, that's not. It's not because they don't want people to look like them. So I don't mean to interrupt.
It's that they don't want people that have a different culture than them. That's absolutely what it is. Spike Lee tells me this all the time.
I don't think that's true.
No. Okay, explain to me the idea then. What is it that they're opposed to?
Gentrification is when usually the way that the process of gentrification goes is that rents are raised over time. There's a number of ways that this can be accomplished, whether it's purchasing properties that collapse and then either holding them vacant or renovating them entirely so that it raises the property value, so that it raises the taxes or raises the local rent, and slowly squeezing out generally people of color or poorer people out of those areas. That's gentrification.
No, they talk about it. They also talk about the cultural people coming in and subsuming the culture of the people that were there, and then trying to replace it with an amalgamation of their culture.
Are you making like a reference to
Dude, what is the replacement theory shit here? Come on, buddy.
Because gentrification is a very
we don't have to decide here, but your claim is that there are no one in minority communities that get upset when people come into cultural areas of theirs and say, "Hey, we want to now be part of." You don't think that occurs?
Can I say something?
Hold on. Not because. Let me finish this real quick, Mel. Not because there are lots of minority people who have a problem with gentrification. Has nothing to do with a change of culture. It has to do with the fact that they're literally. No, it does not. Hold on, let me finish.
Already speak about this. To be honest,
You're talking about Republican Nation or
no? I'm trying. The person whose experience of this is probably
I'm a minority.
Or
me and Mel.
Republican Nation.
It's my show. It's gonna be Demon Mama. Then Mel. Then we'll see.
I'm just listening. I'm learning.
I know. It's gonna be Demon Mama. Then it's gonna be Mel. And then if Rob or somebody else wants to jump in, we can go from there.
Gentrification. People fight against gentrification because they literally get squeezed out of their neighborhood. I've literally lived in a house that was part of a neighborhood being gentrified, and I've seen how through various legal tricks and loopholes, rents are raised to squeeze those people out. So it's not a matter of changing culture. It has nothing to do with changing culture. It has to do with the fact they're literally being physically displaced and forced to move away from their friends and family, away from the neighborhoods they may have grown up in.
May I read a quote?
Specifically because of what gentrification factually is. Gentrification is when when whether corporate landlords or whoever goes in and raises the rent in order to make a neighborhood more desirable. That's what gentrification factually is.
May I read a quote from Spike Lee? Here's Spike Lee quoting people moving in when whites move into blacks. Respect the culture when you move in, Lee growls. But again, he isn't making sense. We can be quite sure that if whites respected the culture by trying to participate in it, Lee would be one of the ones that say it was appropriation. So no whites better open up barbecue joints or spoken word cafes or be rappers. Yet if whites talk by the culture in respectful silence, then the word on the street becomes they want to keep blacks at a distance. In his interview with Anderson Cooper on Wednesday, to clarify, Lee mentioned the controversy in Harlem years ago over park drumming, which new white residents protested. existed. Lee thinks whites were supposed to put up with being woken up on weekend mornings by the drums. That was a subtle issue. I refer to it in the Western Civilization class. Lee seems to think it's open and shut, but when how we feel if whites were drumming and blacks moving into neighborhoods complaining. So again, I've heard Spike Lee particularly make this, that he doesn't like when whites come in and change the cultural atmosphere. He talks about how he used to see things like ethnic food joints that are then that you have people come in and they're placing other food joints. And I'm just saying that this is a type of
one random movie director.
Can I push back?
This isn't just one random issue. There are plenty of
There's like a complete difference between like white people coming in and like gentrifying or like changing the way something culturally is, or then like that. That's a completely like it's about the erasure of like minority culture. He's like using that as a juxtaposition to describe like how we feel for years of just like white people coming in and gentrifying stuff. Like think about it. Like so like Chinatown, for example, was an ethnic enclave, but it's basically been turned into a fucking tourist attraction. Like the Chinese people that actually the Chinese people what?
That's the point. That's exactly
no. That's actually not what That's not what Spike Lee's talking about. Like
the point is that there are people in ethnic enclaves that say we don't like other cultures coming in and taking over our enclave and putting new cultures in. That's literally what you just said.
No. You're misunderstanding. She's literally saying
the community did not want the white art studio or art whatever thing come in, and they essentially like smashed all the windows.
They don't want a Chinese or whatever their enclave is, right? They don't want that. Like they don't want an art gallery, right? That's run by a local Chinese business owner, right? Like bought and replaced, right? They don't want their culture to be erased.
Yes, that's the problem. The problem. That's the thing that's being assumed here.
Like I don't
imagine.
You're using a black man's quote and like completely assuming the opposite argument of what he was trying to say. Like I don't know, man. Like
hold on.
It also seems really weird for like a white dude to be defending this shit to like bring up a Spike Lee quote. I don't know. It seems pretty weird.
Let me just give you real quick, just to play off what Mel's saying here. Let me just give you like a what's the right word here?
White dude.
Like a hypothetical real quick.
What? Why am I not allowed to say that?
Why would you say white dude? I mean, aren't you? I mean,
wait, are you mad? Are you mad that I can say white person? Like, does that bother you?
I don't know. Does it bother you? I mean, does it bother you when somebody says something about you like that? I mean, that they. I mean, you just said it's kind of weird that a white person would quote Spike Lee. Why? Why is it weird?
Hey, we got 10 minutes left on this topic. Just putting that out there.
I mean, you guys. The left is always talking about racism and not being. Right now, you just showed a perfect example. He cannot quote.
You want me to like explain why?
I mean, I just find it weird that he can't quote a Spike Lee. I mean, I don't know why he wouldn't be able to. He's a white guy.
Look. There's it's a thing about perspective. So when you're the argument that like Rob is trying to make is like opposite of what Spike Lee was trying to represent in his analogy. At the same time, it's always kind of weird that like a white person is taking an argument from a black man and sort of doing a reverse to sort of like placate to the argument that Spike Lee is actually like sort of satirizing in that quote. Also, when I mentioned the fact that like
kind of like the same way, like when like white people try to like figure out what black people want to do with statues and stuff, kind of like the same way, like white people putting themselves in black.
That's not what I'm saying.
Apparently, it's only a one-way street, right?
See, the thing is like when I say that, it's like and that actually brings to Dylan's point before. Like, there are things that like that minority people, if they have a credence of like or an experience that they should be able to speak on, it's not saying that like white people can't talk about it. So like I'm not saying that white folks can't talk about minority issues, but in how in which you frame your argument or how in which you are trying to talk about that sort of changes the narrative. Like, so if there was an issue about race and the issue was very much it was a very black issue, I would expect a black person to have a more nuanced or a more like aligned perspective with how they feel about this experience than say a white person who's just observing it but not actually going through the experience. That's all I'm really saying.
If I may speak in, this sort of subjective postmodernism that you can't feel like me if you don't look like me is exactly.
That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
There is no reason.
That's not what I'm saying. Why are you assuming it's postmodern?
Excuse me. You'll have a chance to respond. The idea that a white person can't understand a black person, or that like we need person of certain color to speak on a certain issue, is just nonsense. And
dude, okay.
And secondly,
Rob, you bring up a good point. So wait,
everybody,
Rob.
everybody. But Supreme, I was doing that to make everybody shut up.
Okay.
Okay. Rob, Mel, Supreme. That's the order. No one interrupted.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I don't think I was making an outlandish point. I'm not misrepresenting what Spike Lee said. Spike Lee said that he felt, in addition to economic situations, that there was a problem with whites coming in and not liking the cultural practices that were going on with blacks. And the reason I bring this up is that I think that we're giving minorities a lack of agency when we say, oh, all minorities just want everyone to mingle and associate with them. The only reason they don't is because of whites. That's not true. All groups want to, there is a problem, I would say, that most groups want to associate with groups that look like with their groups. So while yes, there is truth that historically there were laws that encouraged these enclaves, there's certainly also truth to the fact that many of these enclaves want to be enclaves and want their area to be dominated by people that share their ethnicity and culture.
But a lot of that is traditionalism that's been forced upon them by existing like bigotry laws. Like, it's sort of like, okay, so like, let's think about this. If you're a Chinese person and you want to intermingle with other people in society and a bunch of laws and racist assholes prevent you, of course you're going to develop a reactive mindset to wanting to stay within your own race and your own people because of how you were treated. Most people generally just want to intermingle and just be people. This idea that like ethnic minorities just want to like hang out together because they want to is fucking bullshit. Like, where is your evidence for that? Where's your, like, I don't understand.
Show me where the law is that says Asians can't hang out with others.
But
Okay,
all-
Supreme
It's not like an actual law, but it's just like the culture. It's like have you like lived, like, have you ever like been to like really, really heavily like minority parts of town? Like,
Yes.
they're it's not that they do enjoy the culture and they do enjoy their own people, but like over time though, the reason why a lot of these feelings exist is because of that historical racism. Like, the institutionalized systems that oppress people sort of put people in mindsets that go actually against the benefits of what they actually want. It happens all the fucking time. And so it just kind of frustrates me because, like, I don't know, like, you're speaking on like you're speaking from a massive position of privilege here. Like, you're making so many like ridiculously gross like assimilations. Like, you said the words postmodernism.
Yes.
You said like great replacement. Like, holy shit, dude. Like, I don't know. Like,
I never said.
I mean, I don't know,
even know
man.
what that is.
You don't know what that is?
I don't know what
Yes.
great replacement. I've never heard the term.
All that matters.
Oh man, you're it sounded pretty close to the dog whistle, my guy. So you got me a little bit worried there. You know, as a cultural Marxist, I'm scared of that shit. You know.
I mean, I do want to leave Supreme talk, but I'll just say I honestly didn't say great replacement. I have no idea. I've never heard the term. I assume you mean people that are worried about ethnically the country changing. I've said, you can go back and check the history of my podcast. If I happen to be white, I don't even know what my ancestry is. If white people would voluntarily decide to stop breeding today, and there would be no one that looks like me 100 years from now, I could care less. My ethnicity is one of the least important things to me. So I'm not someone who's concerned.
So if you don't care about it, so let me ask you a question. If you don't care about it, then why does it just seems to be like some of the stuff regarding like certain like ethnic movements like kind of bothers you? I don't know.
Where did I say that?
I don't know.
I was going to make two simple points. I was just going to make two simple points. One is that although it is true that there were laws that set up that encouraged enclaves, there's also truth to the fact that people of certain ethnicities sometimes don't want other people coming in. I don't think that's a controversial point. And the second point I was going to make is that I didn't get to make, but was that this conversation, it's couched in terms of like privilege and white supremacy, but it ignores a lot of troubling, complicated things. For example, there's a lot of tension from a lot of illegal immigrant communities and African American communities, because we already talked about how the evidence shows that it actually replaces low-skilled labor, illegal immigration, and drives wages down, and that disproportionately affects African American communities.
That's not correct.
Demon Mama wanted to comment.
First of all, that claim is not correct. The only population that is negatively impacted, and this is reflected in incredible amounts of data, overwhelming data. In fact, it was posted in the chat by Vivian. Is high school dropouts is the only demographic that is actually harmed by immigration, and it's such a small percentage that the economic impact would be very easally redirected. So I just wanted to debunk that statement right there.
Bullshit.
Secondly, no, that's.
I'm seconding that. That's
Read the report. I challenge
Can we read the report? Can we read the report? Can we have the report linked again? Can we have the report linked again?
Secondly-
Instead of just yelling at each other, can we have the report linked again so we can actually go
yeah,
through it?
in
I
the chat.
can link a report that says something different. That's
Link it,
Anyway.
link it, please, please,
It's
please link it.
basic supply.
Please link it.
My second part
Please link
here
it.
is to
Supply and
address
demand.
things that I've been trying
Like
to
economic
Please
day
link
one.
it. Please
Shut up,
link it.
please. I'm trying to finish
Can't
my
hear.
sentence.
I can't hear.
Listen, I wanted to address my second point here, which is something that we've been going over and over again through this idea of ethnic enclaves or whatever. When you have a so-called ethnic enclave, what you're failing to acknowledge is that people may not have people who are complaining about gentrification or who are complaining about a white art studio or whatever coming into their space may not have a problem that it's necessarily white, but that it is replacing something that had cultural history there. For example, say there is Chinese owned like a Chinese-owned movie theater, a business that employs Chinese families, and that business is crowded out because of gentrification, which is an economic process. It isn't just some random thing. Gentrification is a well-documented economic process. If that economic process forces a business, like a Chinese-owned business, out of business, and then that is replaced with some random corporate movie chain, that community might be mad, not because of like, oh, it's encroaching white culture or whatever, or because they don't want that, but because something that was theirs that they built with their own hands that was fueling their community is now gone because of economic pressures, because of an abusive process. A gentrification is a process that's used to crowd other businesses out and consolidate and make money. This is well documented. Like, gentrification studies is huge. I've sat in on conversations on my local town council talking about gentrification.
I linked a study, by the way, from Congress of a bunch of people in the Congressional Black Caucus, I think, helped commission it, that showed that there is a consensus about everyone from this government panel that illegal immigration does drive down the wages of low-skilled black labor.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said I just put in the chat a government study from that was commissioned by groups such as the Congressional Black Caucus, from panelists that agree that illegal immigration does directly drive down the wages of low-skilled black labor.
Okay, so
who are high school dropouts though, right? Like
we are running out of time, and I do want to get to the third topic, so we're going to do finishing statements. If somebody particularly wants to read the study and I get to you, you can move to the end and comment on the study if you want, since I know a study is now being linked in chat. So I'm going to go around. Everybody got a minute to wrap this up so we can get to the final topic, so we at least have some time to get to it, since we're not going to have a full hour for it now. Tiberius.
I think I made my points pretty well on the first one, so I don't really want to reiterate. The second half of that was just partisan cancer. I don't even want to touch it. I do want to look at this study here. The problem is, like, if I'm going to actually look at all the key points and get all the data, that's going to take me hours. So come by my channel if you want to see it. Go ahead.
This is going to be Republican?
Yeah, as in what Rob was saying earlier. Yeah, minorities do like to stick together for the most part. I can't name one Cuban. In my personal experience, one Cuban, because I am a minority, so I can't mention one Cuban that doesn't live in a Cuban neighborhood. One Venezuelan that doesn't like living in Doral, which is a Venezuelan area. My stepdad's Dominican. He likes to live in a Dominican area. For the most part, African Americans, I've had tenants that can easily pay $1,500 a month and can live in a completely different location that's in a better location. And I've literally asked them, listen, why don't you guys move into a better neighborhood? He goes, nah, I like being with my peeps. You can laugh, Mel, you can smirk, and you can do that. I'm talking from personal experience. I live in one of the most cultural and diverse cities in the U.S., Miami. It doesn't get any more diverse than that. We have everybody from the Caribbean, everybody from South America, everybody from everywhere. And I grew up there, lived there for the majority of my life. I've only lived here in Fort Myers for 2 years. And I can tell you that absolutely what Rob was saying was on point. And this is coming from a minority, because my first language was Spanish. And then I learned English when I went to school. And I was born in this country. So I'm speaking from a minority's point of view. I completely agree with what Rob was saying and what Ankar was saying as well. Okay.
Next is going to be Rob.
Wait, were you being also with the machine guns on the top of the wall that Ankar said, or was that
Demon?
No, listen. Don't put words in my mouth, please. I'm sorry, Dylan. I don't mean to interrupt.
I know.
This is a Second Amendment right. This has nothing to do with that. I didn't agree with that. I was nodding my head during the whole time that he said that comment. So don't ever put words in my mouth. You don't know me. You don't know what my beliefs are, and don't disrespect me like that ever.
Okay.
Because you don't know me like that to be
Did I ask you a
assuming that.
question?
No, you said the guns in the wall, as in the comment that he said about shooting Mexicans on the border. I'm not fucking stupid. I'm far from being stupid. I'm very educated. So don't ever try to pull that shit on me. Because I would never even suggest something like that.
We're done with this conversation. We're done with this.
I'm
done, Dylan. I respect you.
I know. We're done with this conversation. Rob.
Okay, just real quick, the study I linked was the United States Commission on Civil Rights. The Civil Rights Community commissioned it. Let me just go to a real couple quick points. Point number 5, they find, I'll read from it. Illegal immigration in the United States in recent decades has tended to depress both wages and employment rates for low-skilled Americans. A disproportionate number of black men. Expert economic opinions concerning the negative effects range from modest to significant. The panelists found modest effects over nonetheless found significant effects in industry sectors such as meatpacking and construction. Point 6 says, still, the effect of illegal immigration on the wages of low-skilled workers who are disproportionately minority members is a piece of the puzzle that must be considered by policymakers in having sound immigration policy. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the idea that we could just have open borders and we could have anyone come in and it'll make things better, it comes off the back of the same Americans that are disproportionately affected economically. I find it ironic that a lot of people just want to write this off when the entire last section was about how statues are harming the black community. So we have to worry about statues harming the black community, but the idea of economically their wages being depressed by allowing illegal immigration, that's nothing worth bothering about. The other thing I wanted to say is the idea of the enclaves. I'm just saying that it's a complicated picture and that we have to be careful not to get to this point where all of a sudden that we say, oh, well, you know, it's just the only reason that, like, we act like based on racial groups that one group is totally pure and it's the other group that's totally negatively affecting them. That's not true. The picture's very complicated. There are ethnic minorities in this country that have problems with other ethnic minority enclaves as well, so it's not just a problem of white supremacy.
Okay, next is going to be Demon Mama.
Yeah, just so you know, I was literally looking at the exact part of the study that you read, and you also immediately did not read the next line, which says that, to be sure, factors other than illegal immigration contribute to black unemployment. The problem cannot be solved without solving the problems of high school dropout rate, high rates of family instability, and low job retention rates. This report here, and I've been reading through this as fast as I can. Obviously, I can't read the entire thing. Does not contradict what we were saying before. That high school dropouts are impacted, but that is a very small percentage of the population, which can be easily, if we build policy, can be easily taken care of. So given that you have, say for example, let me just go off of on a hypothetical like this. Say you have a number of immigrants come into the country, and that depresses the wages of people who don't, or of high school dropouts. What you can then do is say, hey, here is a program that targets high school dropouts that says, hey, our economy benefits from having all these immigrants in, and it benefits so much that we're going to take some of that extra money, that tons of extra money that we make from immigrants coming in, and we're going to fund programs that help high school dropouts. Given that high school dropouts are a very small amount of the population, you take the benefit, the great benefit that comes from having many immigrants come in, and then you redirect a chunk of that, you redistribute that down to people who otherwise wouldn't benefit. That's a really great way of getting the best of both worlds.
Okay, next is going to be Ankar. And by the way, if you want to respond to anything here, you can use your start time and the next thing to respond to it. Ankar.
Yeah, I really like North of Mage. He put that report up, and like 2 sentences later, it essentially, made a counterpoint to their position. But Rob, one thing I want to say is the reason that they support the immigration is the inverse of the reason that they say the right opposes it, which is votes. They just want the power of votes. They know that the immigrants are going to vote with, a very high degree Democratic, and they just want the power. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's just about power, and that's what you see with all the.
I contest that very
strongly.
strongly.
To talk, you can be quiet. So that's essentially all that you see with all the mechanisms that the left is employing today. But supply and demand is, that's basic econ. That's like econ 101, day one. Just the most basic economy class, it's so basic. I don't even know how you can attempt to refute it. I also think it's kind of interesting that leftists are concerned with saving immigrant cultures, but not American culture. Whites aren't allowed to have opinions on, some of these issues. But one of the things that I wanted to cover like 20 or 30 minutes ago, I was not allowed to get to, and I kind of, bowed out for a while. Is the issue with the enclaves, and I was the person that broached the subject of enclaves, and then everybody kind of like ran with it, is it's not that there are enclaves. Okay, enclaves are fine as long as they're, within, as long as they have a certain nature, they're fine. The issue with enclaves is that we have continuous immigration that feeds the enclaves. You have people that cannot exist anywhere else, that don't have skill, cannot communicate, and then they are forced into those enclaves because that's the only place that they can exist, and that's the only place they can communicate. And if you look at the cyclical nature or the cyclical history of immigration, if you look at the immigration numbers over the past, back down, and the xenophobia associated with Irish and all these other immigrant cultures always decreased once the immigration from those countries was lowered. So if we want these immigrants that we have in the country right now, if we want to lower xenophobia, if we want them to assimilate, dividing us as a nation and bifurcating us up, if we want those issues to go away, if we want to remedy it, the most simple pattern, I think that we should hold to it because it has worked.
Next, we're going to throw it to Supreme.
Man, where do I start? I guess the question was, should children of undocumented immigrants be granted citizenship? I provided my reasons for why that is. There are economic benefits for doing so. Granting them ESL education or a pathway to citizenship, while it may cost money at first, I would see it as an investment. Most economists agree that immigration is a boon to our economy. I guess we already covered that. As in terms of xenophobia and stuff like that, I mean, that's why our work is cut out for us to try to encourage people to not be xenophobic and be more accepting of people in different cultures. And people who may speak different languages as a first language. I guess in terms of the whole ethnic enclaves thing, listen, I don't think anybody here is prepared to substantiate any argument about what human nature is or whether or not people like their ethnic enclaves as a result of like desiring a path of less resistance or something like that. If that is true for individuals, then I would still make the same appeal to just reduce the amount of resistance, give immigrant populations the tools necessary to move out of ethnic enclaves and integrate into society, and not litigate them to be forced into these ethnic enclaves. Provide them the training that's necessary for them to seek upward mobility. And in terms of these things disproportionately affecting low-skilled Black labor, I mean, these are issues that disproportionately affect Black people in America because Black people in America are still disproportionately impoverished as a result of systemic racism. The amount of wealth disparity between white and Black people is the same today as it was in 1960 when we ended Jim Crow. It's a problem we have not addressed and still has not gone away. These are all problems that we can interface with and address individually. None of these speak to the essential detriment of like immigration or influxes of people from different cultures. So
next is going to be Mel.
Hey, so to answer the very first question, yeah, I think that's pretty much a yes for me. I don't really have anything to add on that. The only thing I guess I really want to address is I think we have to address working class conditions for like both the most marginalized people in this country, and we also have to figure out how do we integrate like outside actors, as in just like your immigrants, your migrants, your refugees, all the people that we don't classify as people in America because we're a wonderful nation. And once we get these people to help sort of fill in jobs in the economy that can be done by anyone, I think a lot of it is like we shouldn't be focusing on just low skilled jobs, because a lot of these immigrants are not just people that go for low skilled jobs. A lot of them are refugees. Like I've met like a doctor at one of my jobs. He was a doctor in Syria, and he's working a retail job because he just did the medical cannot talk today. The medical qualifications that he got in Syria, like his doctorate license, it doesn't apply to the United States. So he doesn't really have, or like he doesn't have any proof of practice because there's a lot of background testing that we have to have in our months. So like he just couldn't have access to that job. So he essentially like spent his whole life doing work, and now he doesn't have access to something that could make him have a better position in society. So now he has to work a retail job in middle of nowhere. So I just think it's not just hinging on low skill jobs. I think it's hinging on jobs in general. Like we have to maximize like the most amount of job diversity to also help people. Like maybe that would reduce things down. So like I think if we just open low-skilled jobs to really cheap pay, we're going to get a certain kind of group of people that want those jobs. If we sort of say, hey, like we want to let more people in, we want to encourage more diverse immigration, we're going to get more different kinds of jobs. We're going to get more different kinds of people. We're going to create that like that really powerful, strong economic network that like Republicans want. They always, Trump goes on all the time about how much he wants the highest skilled people. Well, we can do that. What if we just change the cultural zeitgeist of how immigrants should be looking at job development? Like what if we develop more low-skilled immigrants to higher skilled jobs? What if we give them chances and not base all of our fears and notions on xenophobia? I also want to address like two of the people, and it's Rob and the other guy without the camera. Like, I'm not gonna say anything, but man, the white supremacist dog whistles pretty good. And I don't know. That's like I guess my take on getting jobs is like the most milquetoast liberal version. Like, I don't really fucking like, honestly, like I don't know, open borders ban, end the state, full communism. But like, if I were gonna like argue this from the perspective of like the panel, I guess, yeah, just make it more accessible. That's it.
If either of you, obviously, I know you both want to respond to that. So we will, you will have time during the first period of that. Well, you also can answer the question that's going to be proposed. Anything proposed now, like that you need to go in the final question, can be responded to during your starting statement in the next thing. And the last person is going to be North the Mage. I got to use the bathroom, so Geek, please keep the rule of law.
He leaves every time, right? The injustice of me going last every single time is not being addressed by the fact that you keep going to the bathroom to avoid my ire.
You
boy
are a wizard, and I feel
you're afraid of my magic. And that's very
your witchcraft.
Let's talk about dog whistling with your warlock rhetoric, kid. Like I'm pissed.
Well, that was his final statement, so now we can move on to the
no. Okay. But on a serious note, I think this study, is like, it's really misleading not to point out that, like who this is commissioned by, and it's commissioned, right? Like who's actually commissioning, like who's the chairman of this fucking board, and it's who is it? It's Gerald A. Reynolds, right? It's a career Republican. Right, and you see partisanship in this, because you see in the study, you see that more independents voted as well in favor of these recommendations. And you see a little bit partisan. You see, Commissioner Yaki consistently voting against all of these findings. Right, so it's not as if this is not gospel. These are findings that a committee chaired by a career Republican found. Right, and it wasn't even conclusive to the point where, like conclusively condemning immigration, to the point where, it's saying this problem cannot be solved without solving the problem of high school dropout rate. Right, the high school dropout rate is first and foremost there. This is not framing it correctly. Right, the study is not framing the issue of the high school dropout correctly, because it's the only thing that's actually affected, and we have other data, overwhelming data, that supports exactly that. So yes, there are people economically affected, but by and large, it's a very, very limited group. Yes, it is African Americans in these groups as well. It does affect them, right? But is it worth what it affects? Right? Is fairer immigration, right? Like where you're not discriminating and right, like and jailing and aggressively deporting these individuals worth, right, some people being economically displaced temporarily? Yes, right, and so like the denseness with which this information has been processed, it borders on malice for me, because what the data does show, and you'll note something that Vivian kind of talked about earlier, right? When I forget, the first person who spoke said, I don't even want to engage with the second half of the conversation because it's partisan cancer.
Tiberius,
right?
Yeah,
that's because they don't want to engage with the very, very serious and important ideas and problems that are facing, like we're currently facing in society. They'd rather just like sweep it on the rug and say, this is ridiculous. I'm outraged by it. It's cancer, but it's a real problem, and we're trying to do the legwork of addressing it and right, like unpacking it, and I don't know if the other side is doing as much.
Okay, I know there's obviously things that people want to respond to. I can see the passion in their eyes. I can see Republican Nation exhausted over there. I can see it. You will be able to in the beginning of the next statement. I just need to do something quick. Somebody's really Googling. So I just need to say something quick. Number one, this is a little break I'm going to take to chill a little bit. First, I just want to say I've been playing Breath of the Wild. Holy shit, what a wonderful video game. I just started this. It is so unbelievably good. Just a good video game. Just wanted to throw that out there at some point. And the second thing, hey, if you like this content, you like me being able to get people from all over the aisle here to talk. One of the few places on Twitch, really one of the few places online, this really happens on this type of a scale. I'd really appreciate if people would subscribe, gift a sub, tier 1, or use that Twitch Prime you have. A lot of people have a free accessible Twitch Prime that really helps the channel out. Give some bits, put a dono in. I promise that if anybody donos with any messages, I will read them all at the end of stream after the panel is over. Now, I would appreciate any support for the channel. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go into the last topic. It is the topic, one that I find really interesting, even though it's not really a hot topic right now. It is the topic question of, should the minimum voting age be lowered? If you want to say whatever age that would be, the typical one is talked about as 16. But if you want to advocate for 7, I'm chill with that too, whatever age you want to go to. We're going to start this with Tiberius.
Thank you for letting me start again first. This is the first time that I'm going to take a hardline stance. I'm not. Not only am I going to say no, I think it needs to go back to 21. There's a lot of talks by Jonathan Haidt that I absolutely agree with that shows that a lot of children now and young teenagers are taking on responsibilities later in life. They're being left at home later. Like I used to be at 13. Now we're seeing the average of 16. Responsibility is now being thrust upon them at an earlier and earlier age, while they're actually taking those responsibilities later. And so I think we actually need to go the opposite way and say, look, our demographics are changing. We're taking responsibilities later. That responsibility should be laid off for later. Republicans next.
Republican. Yeah, you are next. He's figured out the order.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I wanted to make a comment because the whole reason I started Twitch is one, my nephews introduced me to it, but I wanted people to know that just because a person's Republican doesn't make them racist, doesn't make them not be able to find common ground. My channel, for the most part, my streaming channel, has a bunch of anarchists, communists, socialists, Republicans, and we always find common ground on everything. I have no issues with anybody or anybody's beliefs, because that is your God-given right. That is your right as an American. You can believe in whatever you want. I just wanted to state that out there. Second of all, I was kind of very disappointed that Mel went ahead and called out Rob and Ang for comments saying that that's a little bit borderline white supremacy. That's like very insulting. You guys, the left always seems to be bringing up the race card. It doesn't stop with the race card. Like, why does everything have to be about race, white supremacy, or attacking other people? That's just, I wanted to bring that because I wanted to get that off my shoulder because it bothered me a lot. I don't criticize anybody. I don't attack people for whatever they believe in. I don't attack anybody for how they look. I consider everybody part of the human race. That's just the way I look at it. But as in for the voting rights, I completely agree with Tiberius. I think that people are not mature now. I think the generation that's living in now, they're much more involved in gaming, and they don't have the same responsibilities. They don't do the same amount of stuff that people were doing in older generations. And I think they don't have the responsibilities that they like. When
the rules, he's discriminating against gamers now.
I'm a gamer.
He's discriminating against gamers. I cannot stand for this.
Listen,
I will not sit idly by.
I play Art of Conquest all day. That's my my wife hates it. I just don't say it. I keep that on the DL. But anyways, but that being said, I think that we should move with the demographics and I agree with Tiberius on that comment, and that's my opening statement. Thank you.
And next is going to be Rob.
No would be the quick answer. So let me address Mel and the rest of what I see here. I come on this panel in good faith. I really respect you, Dylan. I think you're a fantastic moderator. I'm sick and tired of this being the science of our dialogue. Never once did I make any insulting claims to any of you people. I might have decided to say that I disagree with you. I've done my best to try to ask good faith questions. This is at the end of both questions. We've had people say, oh, they're operating with malice, or they're not operating on good faith, or they happen to be dog whistling to white supremacists. It's because you don't have an answer. If we had a panel where we could have one-on-one and actually have a good faith discussion about the data, we would see quite quickly that people that want to say, oh, you must be a white supremacist, have nothing of value to add to the conversation. You are pathetic. You are disgusting. I don't respect anything that you stand for. North Mage, not quite as bad, but saying that was with malice because the person who chaired the Civil Rights Commission happened to be a Republican. I guess we should go with your Cato.
Bordering on malice.
Excuse me, I think that you're not supposed to interrupt me. You'll have your chance.
You're lying. You're lying, though.
I'm not lying. That's exact. That's exactly what you did. The information that Demon Mama cited was from the Cato Institute, I believe. So I assume that if I cite Cato Institute arguments on things like social welfare nets, that we'll accept them. Or maybe it was Supreme. I'm sorry. One of you cited the Cato Institute. So the idea that you would say that I'm operating in malice just because the study, which accurately said what I said it did, then you then say that I'm operating with malice. It's just pathetic and it's disgusting. And I hope that everyone can see, even if you disagree with my point of view, I've been nothing but gentlemanly. I've tried to listen to the rules, and to listen to people like you at the end when you know you have the last word accuse me of being a white supremacist is pathetic, disgusting, and is the reason that people are unwilling to try to have discussions with ideologues like yourselves that just want to call people racist or say they're not operating on good faith.
Okay, next is Ankar. Please, and again, everybody, please abide by the rules. You will have time to respond. I swear, I promise you, you will have time to respond. Please abide by the rules. It just makes my job harder.
I think you shifted the order, man. I could have sworn I was going after Demon Mama at the
Keep
first.
switching it up because I go down and it's like left and right. So
it's fun, yeah. It keeps me on my toes. I want to make a point, and I think that lobbing insults at Rob or attacks, however you want to characterize it, is pretty. It lacks decorum, because I think Rob and Supreme have probably been the two most well-behaved people on this panel, and to disparage either of their characters at this point, I think is just, it's abhorrent.
Especially mine.
Yes, yeah. I won't even, go after you for interrupting me because I hold you in such high regard at this point.
Wow.
But Dylan, with the whole like white supremacist thing, I made the conscious decision years ago that I was just not going to allow for any racism, white supremacy, whatever to have an effect on where I go. So like I've kind of been inoculated, and it doesn't bother me. So it's not a really big deal. Republican Nation, it's the reason that's lobbed is because it's effective. It's just the weaponization of white guilt. And again, this has been covered. Republicans can't care about black people. If you want to argue about high school dropout rate, quality of education, etc., I think it's all cultural. You can refer to Thomas Sowell about it because I think he is more knowledgeable than anyone in this room about the things that he does know about. But I'm really surprised, and I'm actually going to get to the topic at this point. It's going to be fairly short, but I'm really surprised because I didn't think that my position would be held by all the other right-wing people, and that's no, and it should also be raised. But I would, as I would go more hyperbolic with it and raise it to like 35 or something.
Okay, next is Demon Mama. I know you're eager to respond.
Yeah, I don't know. I found that very silly and performative, especially when Ankar ended the last segment with an incredible rant about how leftists don't care about people. They just want the power. Immediately after opening his statement with, let me...
Oh,
Maybe mute.
Well, that was just serendipitous.
See if I can get the quote right. 1 second.
There you go. You good?
Sorry, my Discord was having an issue.
Got it.
Yeah, no, I just want to remind us that the last segment was started after saying everybody, the left lacks decorum after accusing us of only giving a shit about power and wanting to shift the vote and being liars, and also starting the last segment with setting up machine gun nests on the top of a wall to teach them not to approach the border after a couple of deaths. Yeah, I just find this virtue signally snowflakey whining about our decorum and shit is just embarrassing, honestly, after that.
It doesn't apply to Supreme, obviously.
Excuse me?
Gar.
Yeah, thanks. Great decorum there, buddy. Anyway, I just want to say on this particular topic, I think that the voting age should probably be lowered, given that people in this country tend to start working around the age of 15 or 16. If you can participate in the economy, if you can, and historically people have gotten into the military at younger ages, if you're expected to participate in the economy, then you should absolutely be able to vote. But I do think that perhaps, given other circumstances, like say, maybe if we no longer allow people under the age of 21 to work or something like that, then that would be very interesting to say, maybe we could bump the voting age up then. However, as it stands right now, I don't think it's at all just that people can be taxed on their labor, can be taxed on the things that they own and not have the right to vote. So yeah.
Okay, next is going to be Supreme.
Yeah, I actually agree with the Mama there. I think the legal voting age should be lowered to match the minimum age of the right to work, which I think is 14 federally. If you're able to work and the federal government is able to garnish some of your wages towards federal and state taxes, then you should absolutely have the right to representation. And I would also stipulate that I would hope that we can raise the minimum age of criminal liability to 14 as well to match that, because currently the federal minimum age is 11 years old, and for states that can be as low as 6. Looking at you, South Carolina, a 6-year-old can be tried under criminal charges in the United States, which is absolutely bananas to me.
Wow.
But honestly, I'm less concerned about what we should do with the minimum voting age and more concerned about how to increase voter turnout, how to encourage and incentivize voter turnout for people that currently are able to vote, that are over the minimum age. Currently, it seems that the demographic between 18 and 29 is not able to turn out and vote. And instead of casting blame and trying to shame people who don't go out to vote, I would like to try to find ways to incentivize people to do so. And furthermore, I'd like to add, if I may add to the spicy decorum here, I would like to add pee pee poo poo shit butt fart ass fudge.
It's gonna be hard to rebut. I don't like commenting on these, but I do want to give a little insight about why this specifically I brought this up is because fuck, I feel like I might be a little biased saying this out loud, but you know what? I've been unbiased the whole stream. I could show a tiny bit of bias. So the reason why I brought this specifically was because this is something that's being talked about in my city actually, and a lot of the dialogue is the idea that if you get people voting earlier and you like have people go to schools and talk to them about voting at like 16, then you could actually increase voter turnout. That's the reason why specifically, because I thought it was an interesting idea and thought I would bring it to the stream. Sorry for showing my bias.
Let me ask, where are you from? What state?
I'm from this state of Maryland, and I can tell you my city too. I'm from College Park, Maryland.
Okay, no.
I'm very open. I'm a public figure. Everybody knows where I live.
Oh, okay.
Next is going to be Mel.
Hey, so I kind of agree with like Dylan and Supreme's point. I think just establishing like a really strong voting.
No, I've made a point. Damn. Okay. The conservatives win the debate because I slanted it. I cheated.
Hey, no, you're okay. So essentially, like at the end of the day, like I do think overall like the voting age of 18 is fine. I mean, if you can join the military, you can shoot a gun. But I do actually think it's interesting that like we treat a lot of kids like younger and younger as like older people. I mean, hell, we treat like black kids like as like men at the age of 14, right? So like, you know, we should just make everyone vote. Like 14 and 16 are fine. The incentives are probably going to be just we need to establish strong voting culture. We need to teach people why voting is important. I think a lot of people, once they get to the age of voting, they've seen, you know, the political cycle enough through how stylized it is in 24/7 media to where they just like are burnt out. Or a lot of kids are really hopeful to get in the voting process, and then when it finally gets there, they're burnt out of all the shit. So I think it's not about changing how many bodies we get, but the culture. Like just even getting more people to vote and getting more people in political processes would probably help us achieve greater change, because we would have more people doing those things and we wouldn't all be sitting on panels talking about it. We'd have like, you know, the Zoomers are going to tell us all what to do. To address like weird things that Rob and Anchor said, I mean, I wasn't really attacking Rob, I guess. Like if you want to say that it was attacking him for just saying you are posturing white supremacist talking points, is very different than me calling you a white supremacist. So if you're going to put words in my mouth, or if you're going to like just assume that I'm just calling everyone Nazis, you got another thing coming. I don't like when people dog whistle. I find it really suspect and kind of weird, like why you would go on the internet and just allude to it. It's also interesting that a lot of you guys don't know that these things exist. Like they're pretty common, like people talk about them. So, you know, America's in an anti-Nazi, you know, anti-cop fervor. You got to know all the words now. And second, like, I don't even know Anchor, so I don't really give a fuck about what you say. I mean, you sound like you're saying Nazi shit, so, you know, fuck you. And Rob, I don't have any issues with you. You're fine.
Okay, next is going to be North.
I didn't have any issues with Rob until he fucking blatantly lied about the shit that I said. I said that what was happening was bordering on malicious, potentially, right? I didn't say potentially, but I say bordering on malicious. Bordering. Bordering is a word. It means on the edge of, right? It means, and that said, it could be bordering on malicious, right? A lot of coulds, a lot of woulds. I didn't say shit about him being a fucking white supremacist. I didn't hear shit like that. Maybe I'm not as well educated on the talking points as I should be, but I didn't say anyone was dog whistling about white supremacist shit. I said that the interpretation of one fucking study, it was ungenerous, bordering on malicious. That's it. That's it. So to take those words out of context completely again, right after you take a study out of context again, I didn't have an issue with you prior to this, but your call to civility and your call to I've been nothing but a gentleman is just an attempt to obfuscate the real fucking issues that we're having here, and the attempt to just disguise like horrible fucking talking points in the first place. So I don't fucking appreciate your presence here. I don't appreciate that you'd lie multiple fucking times in one statement, then Dylan mutes me for it without calling you out for your blatant fucking lies, and then to have you fucking sit there and chuckle about it is fucking disgusting. You're calling me pathetic and disgusting? Holy shit! Take a look in the mirror, my guy.
North, I will mute anyone who speaks over anybody during the opening statements,
except for everyone else who did it.
I will mute everyone. You know what? Okay, from now on, if anybody makes as much as a squeak, they'll be muted during opening or ending statements. That'll be future show policy. I don't care if it's legal or anything. As much as a squeak. There we go. That's the new policy, North. I'll do it like a dictator. Anybody does it 3 times in a row, they're kicked. That's new policy. Okay, so let's open it up to the floor. I think that we've addressed this enough. This thing, and we don't have a lot of time left, so I think the last little bit of time we have should be spent on this. I think we've had enough time to address this little inter-conversational drama. So I'm going to go, and you can open it up to the floor. You can talk about the issue about lowering the voting age.
There's one thing that I would like to say. I wanted to say this in my opening statement. I forgot about it. It was too heated. You guys heard me. The cannon got loose a little bit. I let some hate speech go there. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But I just want to say that if I have a position and you have some contention with it and think that it's like racist in some way, then I promise I won't take, offense to it. I won't consider it an attack. Just make the case for why that is so. And I'm happy to listen because I genuinely just don't want to be racist. I want to fight racism. I want to fight systemic racism. So I just want to say that.
So actually, Ankar just sent me a good idea. From now on, I'm just going to have everybody muted except for the person who is doing the opening statement. So it'll be perfect. Hey, Slogan, thank you so much for the $5. Thanks for the gift. The gift of what? This wonderful stream? I agree. Okay, you can open it up.
So just real quick, thank you, Mel. Like, if I misunderstood, but it does seem like quite a tactic that seems quite often. I don't understand what I said that was remotely white supremacist. In fact, I talked specifically that I care so little about my race. If they stop reproducing immediately, I wouldn't care. I didn't use the term that you said I did. So I don't know how me saying that I think that minorities can be just like white people and decide that they want to associate primarily with people like themselves. In addition to, there were racist policies that helped create these enclaves. I don't understand how that was a dog whistle at all to white supremacy. Just real quick to North, I did not mislead about the study. Your contention with the study was, well, because a Republican commissioned it, therefore it must be garbage, and so that borders on malicious.
And you're again lying about what I said. I'm just saying we should think about where the info is coming from in the first place. And I admitted that there were several independents actually who agreed with it. I looked the 3 independents who agreed with it. I addressed that, right?
Okay, so what was?
I said that there's some partisanship going on here, but the fact that you're ignoring specific lines that immediately say, hey, there's a high school dropout rate that's really, really high with African Americans, right? They have either a high school degree or less, right? That information is not put at the forefront of it. And then it said, and you don't put that at the forefront. You don't even mention it. And then again, it says immigration is not the sole cause here, right? Immigration, we can't just blame immigration. We have to look at other causes for the lowering of wages that is related to a lot of wage stagnation in America. It's not just immigration based.
But
so
did I
to
ever
focus
say
in
that?
on that
Did
without
I ever say
addressing it.
I mean, I never made that claim. I said that
not including the information, deliberately leaving out things that are in the study that are at the forefront of the study.
That's not what I did at all. I read the conclusions to it.
If you say so.
I'll read the whole thing if you want. We could read the whole. It's like 90 pages. If you want,
specifically stopped. You specifically stopped in the conclusions. You specifically stopped at the points where your argument was at all attacked. Whereas I left up, I brought it up, and I left up the things that attacked my argument as well, because I'm looking at the info, and I'm not just trying to win. I'm not just trying to score points here. I highlighted my points, but I didn't try and obfuscate and confuse people and go away from like the entire paragraph. The entire paragraph was left up for a reason. I didn't just go to the only information that was there. The entire paragraph was there for everyone to see on fucking purpose.
Highlighted
not because I
1 minute.
But yeah, of course, because it's the one that we're referring to. It's the one that we're referring to. Of course, I'm going to highlight my fucking point, but I leave up the entire context because I'm interested in the data as a whole, not just fucking picking points out.
People would be able to read it. If you went 2 sentences farther, there was information contrary from what I remember. I don't have.
There wasn't a point after 6. There's no point after 6. I highlighted 6.
I didn't say the next number. I think it was like 2 sentences later.
I highlighted the entire 6. I can literally go bring up the screen that's currently in front of me that I just tabbed back to.
It's not the point is I was never making
me to do that?
claim.
I'm going to do it.
I never made the claim. I never made the claim that the only reason that wages were depressed by the black community was illegal immigration. I said illegal immigration is depressing wages in the black community. So did Tiberius. So did Anchor. You then said no. All the studies show that's not the case. I provided a study that showed that's exactly what their conclusion was.
No. You provided a study that suggests it's involved and says we don't actually know. There are other factors that contribute. It's not a panacea. We don't actually know. All we know correlations. We don't know causation here.
It does
That's
not
what you're
say.
saying. That's what the study says.
Illegal immigration in the United States in recent decades has tended to depress both wages and employment rates for low-skilled American citizens, a disproportionate number of whom are black men. Expert economic opinions concerning the negative effects range from modest to significant. The panelists found that modest effects overall nonetheless found significant effects in industry sectors such as meatpacking and construction. Then it says, to be sure, factors other than illegal immigration contribute.
For high school dropouts, which is the thing that we allowed continuously. I'm not saying that there's no impact here.
It doesn't say
all we said it was for high school dropouts.
No, that's
provided
not true,
nothing to
but
refute
even-
that. We've provided absolutely nothing to refute that in a study that specifically outlines the fact that it's high school dropouts.
Listen,
This is not even on topic, so I'm going to
we're off topic. Tiberius
okay, just real quick, if I may say, it's a 90-page study. I had 1 minute. Section 3, about 6 in 10 adult black males have high school diploma or less. That's the people that are talking about when it's low skilled wage. 6 out of 10 blacks.
Yeah,
so
which is the people that we admitted are the only people affected by this issue in the first place.
Closing statements on this topic. We're almost at the time for closing statements on this topic. So let's actually talk a tiny bit about the topic. The topic is well, I've already said the topic. Everybody have voting ages. Tiberius, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. We're good, right? Okay, the topic actually, or sorry, as far as the topic, I want to say that the left actually had a good argument, or at least for me, about, hey, if you actually can participate in the economy, that, you should be able to vote. I like that argument. I really want to get that some consideration. The question that I really would like to phrase there is that should we ask for, or mandate, I don't know what the word I want to use is there an acceptable level of responsibility that we should expect or ask for before a person goes to vote? I mean, we can get into the issues about, can you go to the military at a certain age and all that. That's good points, if you can drink. I just want to know, what you guys think as far as, hey, this is a person who is absolutely capable and competent to vote.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of considerations that go into that personally. I came from a very poor community. I grew up very poor. And there was a lot of pressure for people to begin work as early as possible. I think I started working at like 15, and I worked in a blueberry field. So I've been working for a long time, and the pressure is incredibly high. So people who are poorer tend to start working earlier. They start to begin to be taxed. They start to begin to be a part of the economic system. So I don't know. I think that's a really tough question. I mean, I would totally be for a very radical change to how we look at both voting and working ages. I think it would be incredible if we as a society were able to say, hey, nobody's got to work until they're 21, not in any where they're going to have to pay bills or have full responsibility. They can instead work study jobs or something like that, and then also bump up the voting age with that, to allow people time to actually figure out who they are before they start being, a part of a workplace. I know when I was younger, when you're younger, it's a lot easier for people to tell you things, and you kind of have to take them at face value because you don't have a lot of power. And that's something that does concern me. It concerns me that there are a lot of very young, increasingly younger people joining the workforce, and often they're taken advantage of. And I think that's pretty weird as a tangential issue. And I'm not necessarily strictly opposed to the idea that the voting age should be set in stone at 18. I just think that it's really irresponsible to have anybody participating in the economy, making money for companies, paying taxes without also having the right to representation.
Yeah, I disagree with that, just because I'm looking, I'm going from perspective of my nephews and the kids that I see, because I don't see too many kids. My kids are 3 and 8, so my nephews don't have any idea what the fuck is going on in the world. These kids have no idea what's going on. They're starting a job that doesn't mean they know anything of politics or what's going on in the world, I actually think the youth is not well informed right now. I don't think they're mature enough. I don't think they really care about what's going on in the world. I think that they're in their own
play games, and if they play games, they're too busy playing games instead of thinking about lives.
Well, I'm actually curious about this.
Actually, my son doesn't stop playing Fortnite, man. He does it till like 2:00 in the morning. I mean, this is the future.
Maybe that's.
I'm actually curious in asking though, like, what are the qualifications that you would seek for somebody to vote? Like, what is the benchmark that you would require somebody to pass in order to?
I would say 21.
Just
I would say
the age of
21. But why?
Because
like
the
what are the
maturity level
qualifications?
changes when responsibilities change. When people, when kids have their own responsibilities and they're paying bills, they start paying credit. They're out in the workforce. They pay attention to things that are going to benefit them. Like they're going to see what policies a president might have.
Well, many kids aren't. Whether yours is or not is irrelevant.
Okay, well, it is relevant. It's relevant to me. Okay. Might not be relevant to you, but it's relevant to me, and I'm the one talking right now, so it is relevant.
It's not relevant to the issue at large. Which is
I was mentioning two examples. My two nephews. That right now they both started working and they have no idea what's going on. I'm just going by two examples.
A right to? Do they not have a right to be represented?
Hey,
right? Should they be taxed without representation?
I don't think that they know what they would be voting for. Like
adults don't either.
I see why you would want them to vote, because obviously they're influenced by rap artists or by musicians or by basketball players.
Characterizing my desire. Excuse me. Characterizing my desire for people to vote because it's politically effective, rather than the point that's being brought up that I agree with. Right? It is politically effective, agreed. But the reason for it is because people should not work without representation. I agree that for immigrants as well, right? I think that immigrants, right, like should be able to vote, right? Even illegal immigrants, if they are taxed by us. I don't think, right? Like I think that we should be more open in terms of that, because if you are taxed by someone, you should be represented.
Hey, so
plain and simple.
You and Demon Mama echo that.
Maybe like Demon said, maybe open up the age range. You know, I don't know.
So my only pushback to people saying that like kids are dumb and don't know how to do activism is like utter fucking bullshit. So like black people in this country and minority folks, they are actually they are politicized at young ages. If you're a black child and you're 8 years old, your parents have to have an uncomfortable conversation with you about how the police will treat you. White parents don't have to do that. White parents have the ability to basically wait until their kids are like 16 and be like, oh well, yeah, the cops are.
Here we come.
Well, okay, look.
How the hell would you know? Like honestly, how would you know?
I'm trying to. Can I finish?
You can't say a statement like that black kids are spoken to their parents. You don't know. You're not black.
No, that's.
You can actually go over to Twitch.tv/A4Andre right now. This is someone who deals with this stuff pretty regularly, and like.
Let me finish.
We've listened to people of color. That's how we know.
I didn't even get a chance to finish. Like, so my whole. That's just an example of how people are politicized before they're even able to vote. This doesn't even touch on the fact that like people aren't in the workforce yet. So I noticed that a lot of people, when they get in the workforce at 16, they learn about the workforce and they learn that they're getting taxed, and they understand that now that they have to take on responsibilities that are beyond what the responsibilities they would be doing at school or at home, and it sets them up to sort of become an adult. Like that's why we encourage, kids to get jobs at the youngest ages. It was always a thing. At first it was a necessity. Now it's something that we use as a derivative to create discipline. And so if we're pushing our kids to get younger jobs and to condition them to be adults, they should be allowed to participate in the adult process, or at least learn. So I think lowering the voting age puts them at this good area where we can teach them how to do taxes. I mean, the same thing is, I would say the same thing about teaching young kids about the tax system. Like most kids, like when I was in high school, there was like an elective that you had to take that was basically teach you how to be an adult. It was like how to write checks, how to take out a student loan, how to do basic accounting. Unless you took that specific elective, no one would ever tell you shit unless it was your parents. So imagine if you're like a really poor kid and you're in school, right? And your parents, or if there's a single mom or a single dad, they don't get to educate you the things on economics. They don't get to actually teach you. And not everyone has access to those classes, because usually those classes are access to more privileged folks. So people are getting screwed by the workforces and all these other things, and they don't, and they're like, they want to be represented, but they don't feel like they're going to be represented. So there's already barriers to education. What?
Does everyone on the panel agree there needs to be a minimum voting age? There has to be one.
Right, you can't have a toddler voting, right?
Right. So we
so my minimum voting age would be like 16. You know, you can drive if you can drive a car and potentially drive drunk illegal and kill someone, hell, you can vote.
Okay,
you know,
but again, but you would agree that the same argument you just made could apply to a 15-year-old that works. What would be the distinction why they shouldn't have the right to vote then?
It's just setting an arbitrary age, I guess.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know how that's like. I don't know how. I don't like. I don't want to like. Is that a problem that needs to be solved? Like, I don't get it.
Well,
like,
but you see the same argument.
I think you actually bring up a good point. I think if we eliminated,
really get upset.
I think if we eliminated a minimum voting age, we would probably not see much of an impact. I mean, like in terms of the voting numbers, right? Like, I doubt that like 7-year-olds are gonna collectivize and go out and vote.
Oh, I doubt it. Kids are gonna vote anyways. The 16-year-olds.
No, they won't.
Well,
they will not.
And like people want to do things outside of voting, like I don't know, there's only one more thing I want to say. Like, I think it was like Republican, you said something about like kids just want to like play Fortnite. I've seen so many kids that like, you know, young teenagers that are like leading like Black Lives Matter protests. Like, you know, Huey P. Newton and like a lot of the Black Panthers, like they were 16 when they got radicalized, and a lot of them were killed in their like 20s. You know, like Fred Hampton died at 21. He was like shot like in his bed by cops with his girl with his like partner next to him.
Yeah.
So like kids like to say that kids have never done anything politically active like is kind of ridiculous, because the more you are under scrutiny of like these systems, the more politically you're going to be. I would say that people of privilege aren't as politically active because they don't have barriers or institutions that sort of open their eyes to like the discrepancies in society, so they're not as frustrated. They view the political process as more just I'm 18 and I vote. They're not actually out in the streets advocating for civil rights or civil liberties because they don't have to.
Okay, so I think that like I think what you're saying, there's a lot of like good stuff what you're saying, but it inevitably it gets to the point where you have to make an arbitrary distinction, as you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so
my
arbitrary distinction would be 18, and I think that one of the things that you're talking about here goes to one of my concerns about lowering the voting age, which is I think that we see the over politicization of young people in our schools, anyways, as it is, and
they're not. Some kids are forced to be. If you're a minority group that hasn't had certain civil rights and is being shot by cops, of course your life is now political. What about trans people?
We could do 3 hours on this. For example, the disproportion between men getting shot, the disproportion of men being shot by police over women is greater than blacks to whites. So what's the conversation as a man that you have to have with your child?
That's such a false equivalency. That's not really bad false equivalency. That's such a bad false equivalency. We're not even going there, dude.
50% of the planet's population, like those are
right,
very,
they're 50%,
very.
But they're 90% of those shot by police.
Why is this such a?
Because the argument is
because it's a fact.
Men
commit the vast majority. No, men commit the vast majority of violent crime. Men commit the vast majority of violent crime. You can't divorce that from
it.
So we should address whether or not like. So here's where I see this going, right? The whole like men are subject to this thing more often. I don't think anybody here is abject or opposed to like correcting that issue or examining why that issue exists and trying to like address the socioeconomic disparities that cause that to be so, right?
Right. So then the question is the point of, well, minorities have to have this conversation because they're more likely to be shot by the police. I'm just saying then we could say that about men in general. That men have to have these conversations.
Nobody ever had that conversation with me. I never even thought I would
violent crime.
No, not a conversation about getting shot by the police. They just told me not to break the law, don't do anything stupid.
They told you not to break the law and commit violent crime.
But I say that to my kids, and my kids are white. My wife is white. They have light. I mean, there's no. I tell that to my kids too. You shouldn't commit a crime. What's right and what's wrong. These are fundamental values that you teach your kids. I mean, I never.
All I was saying was the conversation. The conversation is different. So, like, what if you're like a Chinese person and you're living in the United States, and all of a sudden you see acid attacks on Asian Americans due to corona racism, and then you have to tell your kids, like, wow, this country that we thought trusted us for a really long time is now treating us like shit. All I'm saying is that there are different conversations that affect people politically outside of people with more privilege that don't experience those things.
That's not true. For example, what if I saw statues being pulled down and I saw video after video of white people being jumped during these riots?
Well, it wouldn't.
What's the
matter how many videos?
It wouldn't.
Like that's not how we collect data, right?
For example, let's talk about the data.
You're just like you're literally picking like the most like obscure like 1-to-1 comparison. Be like, oh, well, how do you feel about this?
You're saying, listen, if I may. You're saying the problem is that white people have a position of privilege, so they don't have to have these conversations. And
That's
some of
not
the
what I
data
was
you bring up,
saying.
real quick, some of the data you bring up were like
When
Asian
did I
Americans
say
that were
white?
attacked
When did
during
I
the
say
coronavirus. For example,
When
we
did I
know
say-
that according to the Bureau of Justice statistics in 2018, blacks were 48 times more likely to attack whites than vice versa. So to say that, well, there doesn't need to be a conversation about racism or white people they're privileged, they don't have to worry about racism.
I said the conversations are different.
Right.
Can anyone listen to what I'm saying? That
Yes.
doesn't mean they are the same. I said they are different, and we need to consider the fact that other groups in this country have different conversations surrounding their political axioms. So voting to them is going to be different sometimes.
But when
that
you
is all
said
I'm saying.
privilege,
I'm not.
when
Yes,
you said they
because
have
they're-
privilege.
Because there
Okay.
is privilege there, dude. Like privilege
But-
does exist. Like I
do
have
you not-
privileges
do you
too,
not
just as
believe
much
that
as you.
Do you not
Like-
believe that privilege
like-
exists, Rob?
Like
Privilege
there's
exists
I have
for all
privilege- I have
races at all
privilege,
different
like-
times, all genders
you want me
at all
to
different
you want me to
times.
list mine? Like holy shit, dude.
But when everyone has privilege, what's the sense of talking about it?
No.
Because
minutes
because
left.
they're in different
Oh my
levels.
God.
Because they're in different levels, my guy. Like obviously like there are things that like I'm not going to go through that other minority groups like do or don't, and you're going to go through shit that I don't. But like it's talking about it makes it intersectional. That's what intersectionality is. Like
know what
you're
intersectionality
atomizing like your specific experience and going, well, what about me, TM? And I'm like,
I didn't
I
mention
don't know,
me
man.
once. I didn't mention
Can I
me
try it?
once.
Can I have a swing at this real quick? Because like privilege is a real thing. Like I'm trans. I'm very openly trans. So I understand like having some like things that I don't have privilege on. But I'm also white. Like I am not targeted by the police at all to the same degree that black folks are. Like I'm sorry, that's just a fact, and I can acknowledge that. I have no problem acknowledging that. Like I don't feel like that's like a moral statement even. It's just a statistical factual statement.
But it
I think we
doesn't
can
prove
ignore these
racism.
things, and that means, I mean, sometimes it literally is racism.
That
Have
doesn't
have you guys ever looked at the FBI statistics?
Right.
On how many?
we do
I'm not-
I mean, I'm just saying
honestly,
because-
hang on. Honestly, we don't have time to cover this to the degree that it needs to
No,
be
no,
covered.
I'm
I
just
will
saying.
hold on.
I'm just saying because we're talking
honest to
about
God,
white
before we
privilege.
get into this
Please,
anymore,
1%,
Please,
1%
before we get into
of,
this anymore,
of
I
African
really
Americans
hold on.
get shot by cops.
Please
I mean,
let-
and
please
3%
let
are
Supreme
white.
talk.
So
It takes a lot of
Yes.
time and energy to understand and contextualize all these issues and stuff. Like when people start throwing around random statistics about why racism does or doesn't exist, it takes a long time to really like
break it down.
delineate and understand these things. I would really hope that in the future, maybe Dylan, you can have like a "Does systemic racism exist?" panel or something like that.
I had a
that
BLM
conversation.
panel, but I think obviously this issue should probably be revisited. Obviously with a more diverse cast. Yeah.
Hey, Supreme, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
North essentially made the taxation without representation claim. Is that the basis that you make as well for, or the basis you use for lowering the voting age as well?
I'm not particularly married to changing the voting age right now. I think the maybe the argument of just abolishing a minimum voting age altogether might even be a good one. I really am not educated enough on the topic to make a decision either way. But that seems to be like that's the argument that I made in my opening statement, and that was one that seems reasonable. That if you are federally capable of working, and the federal government is able to garnish and reappropriate your wages into the system, that you should, same thing, like no taxation without representation. And I make the same.
Okay,
yeah.
so that would apply to earned income only.
I really don't know. I mean, yeah, hit me with whatever else.
Well, I'm just wondering because if you take it to the absurdity that and the arbitrary age and all that kind of stuff, like you have very, very young children. But again, it's consistent for you because you said that you would be okay with abolishing the minimum requirement wholesale. So,
I mean, maybe I would. I would really have to think about it more and look into it more. Like, is my real answer to that. I don't have a solid. I'm not concrete in any prescription for what to do with the voting age right now.
Do you think that humans' cognitive ability changes as the brain develops?
I mean, I guess that's pretty well supported, but I don't think that's necessary as a prerequisite to maybe, like, for example, I think it's the general medical consensus seems to be that like the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish development until late 20s or early 30s or something like that. I don't see a reason for drawing attention to that as a as a distinction for like when we should or should not be able to vote, like as a particularly useful
I
benchmark.
wouldn't use it as a distinction.
Yeah.
I would consider it and give it weight whenever assigning an arbitrary age for.
Keep in mind, though, that
So I don't think you need to. I don't think that needs to happen. I think a 9-year-old can tell you when they're suffering and should be given a voice to be able to change it.
But a 9-year-old can't process the complexities of modern politics. I mean,
Which
it's
is
not
probably why they're not that interested in participating, right?
I mean,
But again, my point
maybe.
is that there will be
When I
people
was
that will
9, dude,
try
I
to
didn't
take
care
advantage
about
of that. Like I can tell you just from a little experience. I can tell
And
you.
I
just
can
from-
tell you firsthand about people manipulating, voting rights as well. I mean, I grew up in an incredibly rigid religious cult. I know the pressure that I had at 18 to vote in a certain direction. I think that is very hard to divorce, and I don't know that we can really use that as a basis for determining the voting age. Personally, also, I think that statistics and sort of anecdotes like, oh, your brain isn't developed until 25. Those are based on really broad studies, and those are averages based off of really broad studies. And I don't think that we should use those either as the necessary metric, because that introduces a whole lot of questions about how you determine that I don't think we have the tools to determine right now at the current time of scientific understanding. And I think therefore that we should use, at least personally, I think there are simpler answers. If you're participating in what is, more or less compulsory an economic system, if you are working and taking money home, then you should have a right to vote. That's just the way that I
apply
see
to
it.
a certain 6-year-olds.
I'll
like,
say
so-
this. Listen,
People shouldn't be
I don't
allowed to
think,
take
like,
money home
I don't
and
think-
work.
I'll say
Well,
this. I think it's important to. I think it's important to note that, like, listen, like the reason that we have voting is not because people are like perfect agents working on perfect information to make intelligent decisions on how to vote. Like, the reason that we're given the ability to vote is because it allows us to represent ourselves so that we can't be oppressed, or to mitigate the extent to which we can be oppressed by like those that govern us. So the whole idea that, I mean, people don't vote rationally based on the information that's available to them now at any age. So like the development of the prefrontal cortex, or how much they understand about society and all that shit, is actually irrelevant to me.
Now, but we have to have some, like we all agreed, I thought, that we have to have some minimum age, and we have to go by.
I'm not sure I agree that we do.
So toddlers can
personally.
vote.
I don't know yet. Maybe.
I think
I
we
mean,
just need to get
if
off,
if toddlers are gonna
Only
like
by
walk to the polling booth and like bring their ID and shit and vote, then like fuck it. Yeah, why not? I don't know.
If toddler shows up with a
I think we just
passport.
need to get rid of the whole like age thing, because like I'm more concerned about getting like the most amount of people in to vote without like, I guess, apologizing the arbitrary numbers. Like the age thing's just getting weird. Like, what can we do now to get people to vote? Like, I don't think we're ever going to be able to move this goalpost. I don't think it's really
we're
gonna
not.
happen.
I think that
So like I don't know, like instead of talking about like the age thing, like I mean, if one city wants to like try an experiment and see where it goes, then I think the conversation can probably like start going forward after that. But like in the time being, I just think it's a waste of time to like go into the semantics about aging and frontal cortex. Like that's some dog whistle shit, and I don't want to like fucking platform that.
Oh,
So
But, I mean,
I don't know.
it's not
So-
dog whistling. It's not dog-
like-
just real quick.
Your
It's not
rational
dog whistling,
decision
and we should be careful when
to
we're
do it.
throwing that stuff around, because at some point you have to have an arbitrary age, as we said, and that has to be based on the
But you're
average.
basing-
We can't
We
say
didn't.
you're not
We didn't.
basing the age on an average of like, you're basing the age on an average of like physical development, which is like really
Okay,
weird. 'Cause then it, like,
okay.
But
it
again, you
opens a
said
can of worms.
16. Like,
It opens a really bad can of worms, guys.
But listen,
Like,
just real
like-
quick, just
don't
real
worry,
quick,
don't
you
worry.
said 16.
No.
We
You
gotta-
said literally dog whistling.
What?
This
we
is
gotta,
dog
we gotta shut the. You will all have a minute to say your final statements. So if you want to respond to anything, you will, and also for outros. But first, I want to say thank you all for coming on the panel. I know it at times got heated. I know names were thrown, but I appreciate every single one of you, including Viv, who had to leave, who came on here and helped make this possible. It took some time out of your day to contribute to this dialogue, even if times if it was difficult, even if times if feelings were possibly hurt, and you contributing to the conversation, because I do think having conversations like this on Twitch is important. And that's also why I would hope for anybody who is able, if you're not able, please don't feel pressure to do so. I would really appreciate any subs, gift subs, donos, bits, or Twitch primes. I especially love Twitch primes. And any given to me, I would appreciate deeply if you would give that to my channel. I appreciate that a lot. Now I'm going to go around. You can have your final statements on this topic and your outro so people can find you where you are. I'm going to start with Tiberius.
Appreciate that, sir. while I made my original statement, and I do think there needs to be a serious conversation on the responsibilities that you need to meet before you can vote, I do like a lot of the arguments that the left brought. As far as if you can engage the economy, you are engaging responsibility, and you should be able to participate. I do like that argument quite a lot. There was another one in there, and I'm sorry, I should have wrote it down, but I forgot it. As far as my own self, if you like what I had to say, if you want to tell me I'm dead wrong or you absolutely agree with me, come check out my channel and my Discord. We can get you all hooked up there. People have been shouting me out in the chat channel, so I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
You so much. You're free to leave whenever you feel like it. Republican.
Well, guys, it was a pleasure debating with you guys. Every single one of you brought something interesting. I learned something from each and every one of you. We have our differences, but I'm always open to learning something new. If I offended anybody with my views, I apologize. Sometimes I'm extremely passionate about this. I don't do this for a living. I do this because I like doing this. So that being said, I respect every single one of your opinions. I think you all have wonderful things to contribute to society, wonderful ideas, different things that you guys can bring. I'm sure we can all always find common ground wherever. I mean, in some sort of subject, we'll find common ground because we're all human beings and we all care for one another and we all want what's best for this country and for humanity. That being said, if you guys are interested in going into my Twitch, it's Twitch, the Republican Nation. It's a very diverse group of people. Everybody's always debating different things, different subjects. I do it almost every single day as soon as I walk into my office. Aside from that, guys, it was awesome. Thank you, Dylan, for having me. If you guys haven't subscribed to Dylan, go ahead and subscribe. He's a great guy. And give him donations, whatever you can to help him out so he can keep this platform going. Thank you
So much, Republican Nation. Now, everybody, can you all do me a favor? A certain somebody is watching this right now. Can we all just look at the camera and say, hello, Mind Snake? Can we do that for me?
Yeah.
Hello,
Mind
Mind
Snake.
Hello,
Mind Snake.
Hello,
Thank
glorious
you.
leader of the Mayo 6.
Thank you very much. Okay, Rob, it's your turn.
Just real quick on the end of this subject, I think that there has to be an arbitrary age, and it has to be decided on some sort of averages, because actually, I guess if there's charges of, well, that would be ableist. I don't know what we should use, if it should be cerebral cortex. I think 18 is fine, but it has to be on some sort of average of cognitive ability, because otherwise the counter is then you say, well, people have to meet, if we're not just going to have an arbitrary age, then we need people to meet this cognitive ability before they could vote. And that, I think, could lead to a lot of bad things with people saying the same with, well, if we say, hey, if you're working, therefore you should be able to vote. It's a quick step to then, well, you have to be working to be able to vote, for example. So I don't know. It's not something I'm too passionate about. If the voting age got lowered to 16, I don't think that that would be a horrible thing. I haven't thought it through all that much, but you have to have an arbitrary number, I guess, was just my point. Just as far as the panel went, despite it getting heated, look, I think charges of racism, dog whistling to racism, I just think my personal opinion is it gets overthrown. I accept that Mel was saying that she wasn't directly calling me that, so I apologize if I accepted that the wrong way. As far as North of Mage, I didn't think I was trying to be malicious. I thought that I was correctly putting forth an article that I thought said exactly what I was saying. I wasn't saying that illegal immigration is the only reason. I was saying that civil rights people think that it is a significant reason. That's the data that I was reading. But I appreciate everyone on the Republican and negative side, Mel, North of Mage, Supreme, Demon Mama. I thought you guys all had great points, and you said a lot of things, even if we disagree. That's the whole point of this that got me thinking, and especially on this last topic, I thought you all were making great points that I hadn't thought of before. I don't think that I would leave toddlers vote, but that's another issue. Tiberius, Anchor, Republican Nation, thank you so much. I thought you guys were great too. Dylan, you're the best moderator I've seen. I say that in all sincerity. You deal with a bunch of us psychopaths, so congratulations. I think you do a great job reining it in. So I just say in closing, my channel's Normal America with Rob Noah. It's on Twitch. It's on YouTube. I really like this panel. I think that we should be able to come together, even if we're raising our voices at the end of the day. We all walk away. This is exactly what our country needs more of. Even if we don't always agree, we need to have a dialogue. So thanks so much.
I really appreciate it, man. Thank you. I appreciate being appreciated. Anchor.
Well, I'm going to heap some more appreciation on you. Thanks for hosting the panel and giving me an invite and stuff. It's been a pretty good time. I like the discussions, whether they be kind of flat or heated, and also want to extend the same thing to Supreme. Really, you know, I don't know. I like his point of view. I like the delivery. I like the way that he went about things. So it was really a pleasure. I know Tiberius well enough. I don't really need to say shit to him. He can fuck off. And Rob and Republican, man, it was nice to meet you guys. I want to say something to Rob in closing, and that is, you got to witness something with the racism, lobbying, shame, white guilt routine, and that was the first claim is racism, the second claim is white supremacist, and when those don't work, the inevitable one gets lobbed, which is, I got called a fucking Nazi. So, it was nice to see that on display, and especially since it all came from a single person, so you're able to witness that progression, and it was really nice to see North make the distinction or assertion men commit most violent crime, therefore most likely to be shot, does not carry that logic to race. And Supreme is correct. To have that discussion, you probably need a smaller group of people, and you probably need about 100 fucking hours. Like, it's not at all simple. And it's very deep, and there's a lot of nuance to it. Demon Mama's Freudian slip with, taking things at face value due to a lack of power was kind of interesting. But as far as the vote thing, cognitive ability, Rob is right, man. You've got to make some kind of arbitrary distinction. Cognitive ability is the thing that allows for people to make a rational decision and process a large volume of information, which is what is required in order to make good decisions when voting. And absent of that, all that you end up with is just, emotion fueled votes that just, they're not based on anything that's substantive. I just think it's a poor decision to not consider the ability to process information and make a rational decision. Anyway, so my shout out to myself. I think it's Twitch/Anchor. Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays is kind of the days that I'm trying to stream. So if anybody wants to come around, have a discussion, have an argument, just call me fucking names, whatever you want to do. I'll suffer through it. It's I usually enjoy it. So thanks again, everybody. It was nice to meet everyone. It was kind of, it was a good time. So that's it.
Appreciate you coming on. Supreme.
Is this like shoutouts or just closing statements?
Both.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the whole voting age thing. Listen, I actually reject the whole idea of the physical development of the brain thing outright. I think you don't need to have a fully developed brain, or actually the level of development of the brain seems to have no impact on a person's ability to suffer. The whole reason that we vote is so that we can be represented and stand up to would-be oppressors of those that govern us. Also, people with fully developed brains engage in faulty reasoning, fall into the same intellectual pitfalls that anyone with brain development at any stage do all the fucking time. People with fully developed brains come to incorrect conclusions, make logical fallacies, or reach conclusions based on fallacious reasoning all the time. I see no evidence whatsoever that like the physical development of the brain directly purports to your ability to come to good conclusions about things or process data, stuff like that. For the same reason that, for example, the Republican nation's nephews play a lot of Fortnite is probably the same reason they wouldn't even be that interested in voting anyway. Still, I would not use that to preclude them legally from doing so if they had the interest. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this whole voting age thing, I feel like a lot of the principles that people are trying to prop up their opinions on are not necessarily making the point they think they're making, or making points that are substantial in any way otherwise. Anchor, I'm glad you appreciated having me on the panel. I just really hope that you walk back the statement about shooting people at the border. I think that's horrible. I think it's just horrible, man. I'm sorry, but it's terrible. And I really don't think anybody should hold that opinion. Otherwise, you can find me at twitch.tv/thebattlelounge. But I would hope that everybody gifts or spends some donation here at DylanBurnsTV, twitch.tv/DylanBurnsTV, because these are quite substantive issues. And, thanks for having me on, and I enjoyed hanging out with you guys today. And if you didn't enjoy having me on, then stuff it! I scared my cat.
Well, damn. About those donos, I don't know if I could rationally handle those donos and subs, considering since I'm 19, my frontal lobe has yet to go through the continued process of donate. If anything, that means you need to donate more, because I might be reckless with my money, so I need more of a cushion, guys. So I'd really appreciate those donos. Next, we're going to go to Mel.
Hey, so I pretty much agree with everything that Supreme said. Like, I don't know. This is just a really silly conversation in general. I think the only thing I want to add is I don't like talking about like weird ableist sort of like let's atomize things down to development. Like what are people doing wrong that's voting? Because like we have grown ass adults who barely can like read a Facebook article and make a decision about like an electoral system. So like I think it's just an education problem too. Like I think encouraging everyone of all generations of however like how young you are, how old you are, to just like more responsive and elective about electoral politics is the most important like thing we should be pushing. When you start talking about like specific things, you should like parameters like cognitive development or like places. It just seems weird. Also, like I want to bring up means testing. So that's like the thing I think the Supreme could have mentioned is like means testing. So like who is actually making the measurable testing to letting people to vote? So if someone is in power, doesn't like a certain minority group, that could probably be easily abused. Will it be abused? I don't know, because like I said, we're not there yet. So I don't have like a Twitch channel or like a stream or anything. Basically, all I do is I just come on panels, and I'm like the communist punching bag. So you know, if y'all want to like listen to me yell about communism, you can, or trans shit.
Or they can check out our last conversation we had
Oh
about the Pacific and
yeah, we talked
the stationing of troops in South Korea.
Yeah, we talked about. I had a conversation with Dylan like a one-on-one about just like my position like Korea and stuff. That's really all I do. I just hang out in the panel scene and I talk about things and I yell at people. The one last thing I want to say is like I don't know what Anchor's problem is. Like if you really think that I was like attacking you like personally and you like went on this like really really long rant, like I don't know, man, fucking get over it. Also, like if you can't even address me by name or address me, like you're a fucking coward, dude. Like I don't know, like it just seems really weird to me that you're gonna accuse me of like basically calling you a neo-Nazi, even though I was just pointingly saying like, dude, don't say dog whistles. Don't say these kinds of things. Like they're really bad, and you're posturing. You like frame the argument in a really weird way, and it's an awkward conversation for all of us to talk about. I don't think anyone really wanted to talk about in the first place, but you obviously felt passionate enough to bring it up. So whatever. I don't know. Fuck you, dude.
You know what? We're building lifelong friendships here at DylanBurnsTV. That's what we're doing tonight.
Dude,
Melvin and Carr.
Hey, dude, if he wants to be on any other panel, or if he wants to like personally invite me to his fucking channel, we can go. Like I don't give a shit. I'm not
if you two want,
I'm at least a comment. I'm at least able to address him by name. You know, like come on, like all these Republicans. You know, they love to throw that snowflake shit around, but like, man, they don't like confrontation.
If
so,
you
whatever.
two want to have a one-on-one, I'd be happy to provide a platform for that discussion.
I love platforms. All the platforms.
All the platforms. Yeah. I would like to thank Kanja Khan with gifting 5 subs. I really appreciate that. With the message "Dylan sucks," I tend to agree with that sentiment. Thank you for donating to my frontal lobe fund. I really appreciate it. Next, I'm gonna throw it to North.
Yeah, Dylan, thanks for having me. I would like to apologize for breaking your rules, but I would beseech you not to mute everyone during the initial conversation. I think that like going through the process, I think having the ability to air and having the ability to be silenced is an important thing in these kinds of discussions, right? Especially when someone says some really dumb shit. But I think more importantly, because it's just better content when people can like, you know, at least like, you know, throw in a quick one-liner, because it is funny, like in those intros. If you're not interested in that,
it's
though,
funny, but
it's
just last week. It was a really toxic conversation about suicide, and it was really bad. And I was at a breaking point, and so I'm getting stricter rules because I'm just not putting myself through that again. And that's why I have Geek in here too to be an assistant mod.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like it definitely, right. Like you need to moderate your own shit. Yeah. But I just, right. You were like, I'm just gonna mute everyone now all the time. Like before, like I would push back on that. Just like personally, and obviously you don't have to heed my advice. That would be what I would. That all I would say, because I think you did a really good job moderating. I really think that you did.
Thank you.
I think that was good. No, even if I was trying to break the rules there, because Rob, I wasn't calling you white supremacist. People mishear things, and I get a bit too heated. That's half the fucking content, though. So I don't really care. I hope you have no hard feelings about it. I don't. Right. You know, it's water under the bridge. I appreciated things that you said about, you know, that these conversations are helpful no matter, you know, how they occur, and I agree, and I really appreciate that Dylan is willing to have them, because a lot of people aren't, and a lot of people are really challenged in providing, you know, like relatively, or like trying to be unbiased and trying to like platform people in a way that you know, can be potentially harmful, but is ultimately good for discourse at the end of the day. So I wasn't trying to call you white supremacist. I wasn't trying to say what you were doing was malicious. I said it seemed a little bit weird. And the reason why, right, is because I hadn't seen the entirety of the study. And it's really hard to like go through, like you said, it's a 90-page study. And the sentence that I'll pull from it here, and again, it's like anecdotal Andy stuff like with this, but 3 of the panelists who were economists argued that immigration, both illegal and legal, has economically benefited the United States on a national level, right? So I think that while like the thing that we were trying to concede was, hey, it does affect people, it does affect these black workers, these like low skilled workers, and it does like particularly high school dropouts, it does affect people, but by and large it is actually helpful, and that's the thing, the only thing that we're trying to, and even this study agrees with that. 3 out of 5 of the panelists, and the 3 who were economists, all 3 who were economists. So I would close on that, and if you guys appreciate this, you definitely should, instead of following me or coming to my channel or visiting anything that I do, because I just play a bunch of classic WoW, you should sub to Dylan, you should follow Dylan. He's a fantastic guy. I really am looking forward to seeing his channel grow, and so I really would do that, because he's a fantastic guy. I look forward to when I will call in favors from him to pardon me when he is president of the United States and I'm in a cell locked away by an evil warlock. So thanks for having me, man.
I'll try my best. I mean, the thing is, I'll pardon you because at least you're not Asmongold. So I'll pardon
so
you.
It's not
on
a
that
study.
one.
It's not a study. Correct. It wasn't a study. It wasn't like a scientific study. It was like a briefing. It was a briefing report by a commission, the Civil Rights Commission. So, Rage Pope, thank you for correcting me.
I appreciate the sentiment, North. I really do.
There's no peer review in briefings, which is a notable thing, right? And we had like economists disagreeing on this, so I think that's an important thing to highlight, like with any data.
Okay, and finally, we're wrapping up with Demon Mama.
Hello. I'm gonna bring some attention to my prefrontal cortex. You can see here, despite Dylan Burns insulting the rights of our galactic brethren at the beginning of this conversation, I do want to thank you for having me on. I'm gonna post my stuff real quick in the chat. You can see it there. You can follow me at Twitter at your Demon Mama or Demon Mama Live here on Twitch. Hopefully I'll be streaming again soon. Thank you for having me on. It was great talking with all of you. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Really.
I appreciate having you all on, and you're all invited to come back again, and I appreciate you all being willing to take part in this discussion. I love political Twitch, but it feels like half of panel shows are just DSA meetings at this point, so I'm happy to have a little bit of confrontation. So thank you all for stopping by, and everybody who came today. The next panel show, the next Hippie Dippy podcast will be next Friday at 8 p.m. Be sure to tune in then. Who knows what we'll talk about that? Because I'm a hippie, and dipping our toes to the top. You know what? I do. Because I'm a genius. Let's send them all off. See y'all guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye, nerds. Thank you.
Thank you all for stopping by. I really appreciate it. You all stopping by.
Thank you for having us.
North to Mage, when I was addressing that, I was addressing Mel saying about the whistling, not you about the white spread. But I appear to have
I might have misheard you.
And I appear to have misrepresented.
I think that you did say that I was.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Listen, guys, everybody's saying how good the show was. Fuck that. We did a good job.
No, it was a good show. We provided some.
Yeah, don't worry
about I come onto this, and Dylan has an expectation of it, and I have an expectation of it. I'm here in part to be inflammatory. That is in part why I'm here.
I'm fine with it. I thought it was
fine. And Dylan knows that full well. He's not making any motions because he knows.
Fireballs.
We all get along at the end of the day. So.